Chapter 1045. Under the lock of the Milky Way sword intent, the black-clothed woman was unable to dodge. She could only take on Qinchuan's sword head-on. With a shout, she took out an exquisite black round shield. With a wave of her hand, the black round shield expanded to several hundred feet in size, completely protecting her. This black round shield was a sacred artifact refined from the black-clothed woman's own carapace. Although it was only a low-grade sacred artifact, its defensive power was extremely astonishing. In the black-clothed woman's opinion, it was more than enough to block Qinchuan's Milky Way sword intent. When Qinchuan saw the black-clothed woman take out the black round shield, he couldn't help but narrow his eyes. Although the black-clothed woman had refined the black round shield extremely well, Qinchuan, who understood Zerg very well, could still see some traces of carapace within it. This also confirmed his previous guess. This black-clothed woman really did come from Zerg. Boom. The Milky Way sword intent directly slashed the black round shield. The intense collision created a shockwave that spread out in all directions, completely obliterating everything in its path. Within a radius of 100 miles, aside from Qinchuan and the black-clothed woman, there was no trace of anything else. Hai Junlan stood 100 miles away, her eyes filled with shock as she looked at Qinchuan. She had originally thought that Qinchuan was being forced to do something beyond his ability. She had only wanted to face the black-clothed woman because he had no other choice. She had never imagined that Qinchuan would have the strength to face the black-clothed woman head-on. Milky Way sword intent. One sword becomes 1,000. Qinchuan gave a low shout. The Milky Way sword intent immediately split apart, turning into 1,000 arm-length swords that attacked the black-clothed woman from all directions. Under the support of the Milky Way sword intent, the sharp sword chi had the lethality to tear apart everything. The black round shield that could only block one attack was clearly unable to block all of the sword chi. Faced with the sword chi's siege, the black-clothed woman coldly snorted. She raised her hand, and layers of space appeared around her. The sword chi rampaged through them, but they were unable to take a single step closer to the black-clothed woman. Space folding. Qinchuan could not help but frown when he saw this. He was not proficient in the laws of space, so he really did not know how to deal with an opponent like the woman in black who was proficient in the laws of space. "Your tricks won't work on me," Linley said. The woman in black sneered and said to Qinchuan, "For a Dongshu stage cultivator, the most important thing is not how many killing moves he has mastered, but the control of the power of law." Hearing the woman in black's words, Qinchuan took a deep look at the layers of space around the woman in black. He didn't know how to refute the woman in black. In the face of such a powerful law of space, his attacks were indeed useless. He, who was not proficient in the laws of space, was completely helpless against the woman in black. Just as Qinchuan was helpless against the woman in black, the runic sword in his mind suddenly transmitted an image into Qinchuan's mind. The image in front of Qinchuan's eyes flashed. The woman in black disappeared, Hai Junlan disappeared, and everyone else disappeared. What replaced them were endless void creatures, huge void tentacles, and the repulsive Thompson. This is when this thought appeared in Qinchuan's mind. He slowly looked into the distance and saw another of himself. This is Wang Yangfeng's first-person perspective. When Qinchuan thought of this, an extremely vast and mighty force suddenly burst out from his body. It was so powerful that it could destroy the heavens and earth. At this moment, Qinchuan, who was not proficient in the laws of space, suddenly realized that the vast and mighty force was the law of space. It was an even more powerful law of space. If the woman in black's understanding and control of the laws of space was rated at 10, then Wang Yangfeng's understanding and control of the laws of space was rated at 100, a difference of 10 times. Shattering space. Great destruction, Qinchuan murmured softly. His eyes gradually brightened. If he could master great destruction, then he could easily break the folds of space around the woman in black and kill her instantly. However, it was a pity that this was only Qinchuan's beautiful fantasy. The person who truly mastered great destruction was not him, but Wang Yangfeng. At this moment, Qin Chuan also understood the meaning of the runic sword. The runic sword wanted to borrow Wang Yangfeng's first-person perspective to let him deeply experience the feeling of controlling the laws of space. In Qin Chuan's senses, a long time had passed. However, in reality, only a moment had passed in the outside world. When Qin Chuan regained his senses, the woman in black was still under the siege of the sword aura. She was in an invincible position. I've played enough. It's time to end this. The woman in black was already impatient. She did not want to continue being entangled with Qin Chuan. She shouted and raised her hand towards Qin Chuan. Space. Collapse. For the woman in black, using space collapse was an extremely laborious task. However, in order to finish off Qin Chuan as soon as possible without exposing her identity, she could only use this move. When the woman in black raised her hand, Qin Chuan had already sensed the existence of danger. He immediately retreated, increasing the distance between him and the woman in black. However, at this moment, a strange black hole suddenly appeared in front of him. No matter how he dodged, he could not get rid of it. Qin Chuan could foresee that once he fell into this black hole, he would be crushed by the power of the laws of space. Sword come! Qin Chuan roared and stabbed the black hole in front of him with the Milky Way sword. Endless sword aura erupted and rushed towards the black hole. However, the black hole was insatiable. No matter how much sword aura rushed into it, it could not be filled. It still chased after Qin Chuan relentlessly. What the hell is this? Qin Chuan felt as if he was about to go crazy. This way of fighting was simply too torturous. It made one feel aggrieved. Qin Chuan swore that if he could return alive from this battle, he would comprehend the laws of space and control them. Kill! The woman in black roared. The black hole suddenly expanded, becoming hundreds of feet wide. In the blink of an eye, it swallowed up the space around Qin Chuan. At this moment, Qin Chuan used all his strength to use the thunder escape technique. However, he was still unable to increase the distance between him and the black hole. The terrifying suction force made it impossible for him to escape. When the crisis of death truly arrived, Qin Chuan's strong desire to live caused him to erupt with all his strength. He roared out loud, "Break for me!" An extremely mysterious strength gushed out from Qin Chuan's body and rushed towards the black hole. It was like glue that glued the black hole together, causing space to slowly return to its normal state. Whoosh! Qin Chuan's face was extremely pale. His entire body was dripping with sweat. He looked at the space in front of him that had been repaired. His face was filled with the joy of surviving a calamity. Although he did not know what he had done, he knew that he had survived. However, the feeling of losing all his strength was not pleasant. Chapter 1046. This is impossible. The woman in black looked at Qin Chuan in disbelief and exclaimed, "How could Qin Chuan have the ability to flatten space? This was absolutely impossible." Not to mention the woman in black. Even Hai Junlan and the others who supported Qin Chuan and hoped that Qin Chuan would win felt that this scene was inconceivable. Qin Chuan clearly wasn't proficient in the law of space. It could even be said that he didn't know anything about it. However, Qin Chuan had clearly displayed a law of space that was far more powerful than the woman in black's. If not for this, Qin Chuan would have been swallowed by the black hole and died in the space collapse. Facing the shocked and incredulous gazes of countless people, Qin Chuan chuckled and raised his hand to wipe the sweat on his forehead. He said to the woman in black, "Nothing is impossible in this world. Speaking of which, I still have to thank you. If you hadn't forced me into a desperate situation, perhaps I would have needed some more time to comprehend the law of space." If the runic sword helped Qin Chuan experience Wang Yangfeng's first-person perspective and planted a seed of the law of space in Qin Chuan's heart, then the woman in black's pressure on Qin Chuan was fertilizer, causing the seed of the law of space to take root and germinate in Qin Chuan's body. Hearing Qin Chuan's words, the woman in black's face turned sinister. She gnashed her teeth and said, "I don't believe that you are a genius who can break through in a life and death situation. Even if you are, I will still kill you. Space collapse. The woman in black ignored her own condition and once again used the space collapse on Qin Chuan. She didn't believe that Qin Chuan could erupt with such power again. Seeing this, Qin Chuan immediately took out several clear spirit pills from his storage ring and swallowed them. At the same time, he held the silver river sword in his hand and poured the law of space he had comprehended into the silver river sword. He then slashed at the black hole in front of him. One sword breaks, all loss. As Qin Chuan swung his sword, the black hole slowly closed under everyone's gaze. The female black-clothed figure's face turned ashen when she saw this scene. She couldn't figure out how Qin Chuan was able to skip all sorts of prerequisites and directly grasp the shattering energy of the space laws. After all, that was a power that was beyond her reach. Even that lord was only able to achieve this level. Just as the woman in black was feeling shocked and confused, Qin Chuan's figure suddenly appeared behind her. With a slash of his sword, space shattered. The terrifying killing intent awakened the woman in black, who had fallen into deep thought. She turned around in horror, wanting to control the black round shield to block Qin Chuan's attack. However, in front of the power of destruction, the black round shield was easily pierced. Pucci. The silver river sword pierced the woman in black's robe and pierced her chest. A powerful sword aura came out of her body and swept out in all directions. Just as Qin Chuan was about to kill the female black-clothed figure, Hai Junlin's exclamation suddenly sounded out from afar. In the next moment, the figure of the black-clothed figure that was supposed to be sealed suddenly appeared by Qin Chuan's side. She blasted out a punch, catching Qin Chuan off guard and forcing him back. "Big brother, little sister, are you okay?" The man in black with a hoarse voice stood in front of the woman in black. He looked at Qin Chuan cautiously, his eyes full of fear. "We are no match for him." The woman gritted her teeth and said, "Let Pa deal with him." At the same time, on the other side of the battlefield, Pa had completely suppressed Hai Wudi and Tu Shanhan. Hai Wudi and Tu Shanhan tried their best, but they couldn't do anything to Pa. Even though Hai Wudi had taken out the Emperor's token, which was a trump card of the Grand Capital Palace, he could only barely keep himself from losing. It was only a matter of time before Pa won. By now, Pa had noticed the situation of the brother and sister. He snorted and said, "What a pair of useless things. You can't even take care of an early-stage Dongshu kid. If that's the case, leave the other side to me." While speaking, Pa turned to Hai Wudi and Tu Shanhan. A cold light flashed across his eyes as he said in a deep voice, "Void cage." As Po's voice faded, dark purple light beams suddenly appeared where Hai Wudi and Tu Shanhan were standing. They connected with each other and formed a cage. No matter how they attacked, they couldn't break the cage. "Humph! You two useless things won't be able to break the void cage in your lifetime." After temporarily taking care of Hai Wudi and Tu Shanhan, Pa slowly turned his eyes to Qin Chuan. Just as he was about to attack Qin Chuan, the spaceships in the distance suddenly launched an attack on him. Cannons kept roaring. These cannons, which were powerful enough to kill Apotheosis stage cultivators and even pose a threat to Dongshu stage cultivators, were like child's play to Pa. They couldn't do any harm to him other than tickling him. "I've had enough of you worms." Pa snorted. He raised his hand and casually waved it in the direction of the spaceships. Dozens of spaceships suffered a huge impact and exploded on the spot. Seeing this, everyone couldn't help but feel despair. Originally, they were hoping that Qin Chuan would defeat the two men in black and then help Hai Wudi and Tu Shanhan deal with Pa together. Who would have thought that Hai Wudi and Tu Shanhan would be trapped by Pa? Now, only Qin Chuan was standing in front of them. With Qin Chuan's strength, there was no way he could be Po's opponent. "We're doomed. We're all going to die. This guy is too strong. Even Commander Hai is no match for him. We're doomed. What should we do?" Why hasn't that universe overlord arrived yet? Just as everyone was panicking and at a loss, Tu Shanyue stepped forward and said angrily, "Are you all useless? Have all these years of cultivation gone to waste? Qin Chuan is not more than 100 years old. and he's only at the early Dongshu stage. How can you place all your hopes on him? Don't you have any shame? I can understand if the cultivators below the Dongshu stage are afraid of retreating, but why are you Dongshu stage cultivators who have lived for hundreds of years standing here? Useless. You're all useless. After saying this, Tu Shan Yue ignored the others and flew toward Qin Chuan. Even if he had to die, he would fight to the death. He would never be scared to death. Hearing Tu Shan Yu's words and looking at Tu Shan Yu's brave back, the others all showed a trace of shame on their faces. It was normal to be afraid of death, but facing such a situation, it was indeed despicable to let a young man stand in front of them. The Dongshu stage cultivators of the Tu Shan family stepped out first and followed Tu Shanyue toward Qin Chuan. 8. The deputy commander of the great mansion also stepped out. He didn't want to be a coward. Seeing this, the Dongshu stage cultivators of the other forces also summoned their courage and stepped out, flying toward Qin Chuan. No matter the result of this battle, they would do their best. Dying in battle was not scary, but dying without a fight was scary. Chapter 10:47. Qin Chuan. Tu Shan Yu slowly came to Qin Chuan's side. His face was solemn, as if he was ready to die for the cause. Qin Chuan saw Tu Shan Yu's expression and couldn't help but laugh. He said with a playful tone, "Seventh Elder, what are you doing? Are you ready to die?" Hearing Qin Chuan's words and looking at Qin Chuan's calm expression, Tu Shan Yu slightly frowned and responded, "You don't have to pretend to be relaxed. This is the responsibility of the older generation. It's not right for you to bear this burden." Hearing this, Qin Chuan chuckled. He turned around and glanced at those Dongshu stage cultivators who were flying over one after another. He asked Tu Shan Yu, "Seventh Elder, what do you think are our chances of winning? We'll do our best and leave the rest to fate. No matter what the chances are, we won't retreat. We'll advance bravely." The one who answered Qin Chuan's question wasn't Tu Shan Yu. It was the vice commander of the Great Du Mansion, Ate. Ate came to Qin Chuan's side and looked at Qin Chuan with bright eyes. He said in a deep voice, "I saw everything. Thank you for saving the young master." Saving Hai Junlan was something Ate should have done. However, he was still immersed in the great grief of the sea demon being killed in one strike. He didn't react in time. When he came back to his senses, Qin Chuan was already fighting with the woman in black. Hai Junlan controlled the other man in black and pushed the sea demon to the edge of the battlefield. At that time, Tay didn't join the battle immediately because he wanted to protect Hai Junlan and save the sea demon. Now that the other man in black had escaped and the sea demon was dead, he didn't need to stay by Hai Junlan's side to protect her. He had to stand up for the reputation of the Great Du Mansion. The Great Du Mansion had no cowards. No need to thank me. At that time, no matter who was in danger, I would have done the same. Qin Chuan said to Ate, "I didn't do it because she was Hai Junlan." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Ate replied, "No matter what Mr. says, the young master's life was saved by Mr. The Great Du Mansion will remember this favor and repay it in the future." Qin Chuan chuckled. "Let's talk about it after we return to the capital alive." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Ate subconsciously turned his gaze towards the two men in black who were confronting them, as well as Pa, who was slowly walking over. He said to Qin Chuan, "Sir, you've already done enough. Now that we're here, sir..." Before Ate could finish his words, "Yours to let me escape? I can't escape. If I don't kill them, it's useless no matter where I run." Qin Chuan wasn't the kind of person who liked to run away and drag out an ignoble existence. Although the current situation was very dangerous, it was far from being impossible to turn the tables. "You people are about to die. Why are you so talkative?" The black-clothed man with a hoarse voice snorted and interrupted Qin Chuan in a tease conversation. Qin Chuan's indifferent attitude of not putting them in his eyes was really hateful. "You two really disappoint me." At this moment, Pa finally arrived in front of everyone. He looked at Qin Chuan and the others with a disdainful expression. Nearly 100 Dongshu stage cultivators seemed like an extremely powerful force, but in fact, in Po's eyes, they were all ants that could be killed with a slap. No matter how many there were, it was useless. The only person he was a little afraid of was Qin Chuan, who defeated the black-clothed woman. However, he was only a little afraid of him. Boy, if you choose to submit to me now and accept the void's gift, I can spare your life. Pa looked at Qin Chuan and said with interest, "You are the most outstanding young man I've ever seen in this world. You have a bright future ahead of you. There's no need for you to die here." Qin Chuan laughed mischievously. "Since you've said so much, why don't you submit to me instead?" "Arrogant," Pa roared angrily. He raised his hand and threw a punch at Qin Chuan. An astonishing power erupted in an instant. Qin Chuan didn't have time to react and was sent flying by the punch. Just the aftermath of the punch was enough to injure the people standing beside Qin Chuan, causing them to vomit blood and be sent flying. Everyone looked at Po in horror. The aftermath of this punch was so terrifying. Qin Chuan, who was facing this punch directly, was probably already scared out of his wits. When everyone looked at Qin Chuan with complicated emotions, they were surprised to find that Qin Chuan was not dead. He had only suffered some serious injuries. "Old thing, that punch of yours still hurts a lot." Feeling the intense pain in his body, Qin Chuan couldn't help but grit his teeth. The strength of this punch had almost reached the limit of what he could endure. If it had been any stronger, he might have really died. Seeing that Qin Chuan was still alive, Po's eyes flashed with surprise. He said, "You're not bad. I'm starting to admire you more and more. I'll give you one last chance. Are you willing to submit to me?" Qin Chuan grinned when he heard this. "Then try and see if you can take this move of mine." Before Qin Chuan could finish his sentence, a dark green talisman array slowly appeared in front of him. This talisman array exuded an extremely powerful energy fluctuation, and in an instant, it grew into tens of thousands of towering trees surrounding Pa. World of Woods. Everyone was still hoping that Qin Chuan would use some sort of trump card to contend with Pa. However, when they saw the talisman array before Qin Chuan, they couldn't help but reveal looks of disappointment. If it was only a grade 5 talisman array, even a battle array wouldn't be able to cause too much of a disturbance to an expert of Po's level. But soon, everyone realized that this wasn't the case. Pa, who could kill any Dongshu stage powerhouse with one punch, couldn't easily cut down any of the trees in the World of Woods. The toughness of these towering trees was beyond everyone's expectations. "This is..." Tu Shanhua looked at the scene in front of him and said in disbelief, "This isn't a level 5 array. This is a level 6 array." A level 6 array. Hearing Tu Shanhua's words, everyone was extremely shocked. This was a level 6 array? Qin Chuan was a level 6 battle array master. When did such a young level 6 battle array master appear in Telung City? At this moment, Aid also realized that the World of Woods was definitely not a level 5 array. It was most likely a level 6 array. He couldn't help but say excitedly, "A level 6 array's power is far beyond a level 5 array. If this is really a level 6 array, even a powerhouse like Pa won't be able to break it easily." Hearing 8's words, everyone's despairing mood was instantly lifted. If what 8 said was true, then wouldn't Qin Chuan be able to restrain Pa? After losing Pa, their strongest combatant, the remaining 2 black-clothed men would definitely be no match for them. Chapter 1048. Qin Chuan looked at Pa, who was trapped by the World of Wood, and couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. The reason why he had the courage to continue staying here and face Pa was because of the existence of the World of Wood. Back then, the runic sword had told him that the World of Wood and Whirlwind of Clouds would level up as his strength increased. Now that he was already a cultivator at the Dongshu stage, the World of Wood and Whirlwind of Clouds would naturally level up to a level 6 battle array. He had used the Whirlwind to force back the enemy in the remains of the ancient human race. In order to prevent his identity from being exposed, he chose to use the realm of woods to deal with Pa. It seemed that the effect was unexpectedly good. Hearing the excited discussions around him, Qin Chuan was not complacent. On the contrary, he was a little angry. He couldn't help but yell at the crowd, "What are you waiting for? Are you really going to sit here and wait for death? Why don't you take this opportunity to kill those two fellows and rescue Governor Hai and the Great Elder? Hearing Chinchuan's yell, the excited crowd felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over their heads. Chinchuan had trapped Pa, but it didn't mean that Chinchuan could trap Pa for the rest of his life. If they could kill the two men in black, save Hai Wudi and Tu Shanhan, and then attack Pa together, they would definitely win. If they really counted on Chinchuan all the time, they might as well kill themselves. What was the point of living? Just as the crowd came to their senses and prepared to kill the two men in black, the woman in black broke the space first and fled with her companions using the power of space. Seeing this, the crowd didn't want to chase after them. Instead, they immediately flew toward the void cage in the distance, trying to break the void cage with brute force and save Hai Wudi and Tu Shanhan. In the void cage, Hai Wudi and Tu Shanhan had seen everything that had happened. Their expressions were extremely shocked and complicated. They had never thought that Chinchuan would step forward and turn the tide at this critical moment. I really didn't expect that he was a level 6 battle formation master. Hai Wudi looked at Chinchuan with a complicated expression, then said to Tu Shanhan, "Brother Tu Shanhan, do you know about this?" Tu Shanhan shook his head and said to Hai Wudi, "I'm as shocked as you are. This young man has been a guest of our Tu Shan family for more than half a year. I always thought he was a level 5 battle formation master. I didn't expect him to be a level 6 battle formation master. The gap between a level 5 talisman formation master and a level 6 battle formation master could be said to be a world of difference. After all, there were not many ordinary level 6 talisman formation masters in the city of Trump, let alone the rarer level 6 battle formation masters. He's so young. When did he comprehend the Tao runes? And where did he obtain the grade 6 battle formation?" Hai Wudi found it hard to understand. What Chinchuan had displayed had completely exceeded his understanding. "I don't know." Tu Shanhan gave a bitter smile and said, "As far as I know, before Chinchuan became a consecrator of our Tu Shan family, he had studied the Tao of Sunflower for about 10 days. He couldn't have studied the Tao of Sunflower within 10 days. That's ridiculous. Comprehending the Tao of Sunflower in 10 days, not even the most talented spell formation master in the entire universe could do that. Anyway, this is a good thing." Hai Wudi cast a complicated glance at Chinchuan and said, "This young man must have had a special opportunity. We should make friends with him." Hearing Hai Wudi, Tu Shanhan nodded in agreement. By now, Chinchuan was qualified to be on an equal footing with them. After this was over, Tu Shanhan would go back and find a way to keep Chinchuan in the Tu Shan family. Damn it, these annoying things. Pa punched on the trees around him over and over again. Every time he broke a tree, another tree would take its place. Pa had no chance to break out of the encirclement. Actually, Chinchuan did consume a lot of Po's spiritual energy by destroying these trees. If Chinchuan wanted to trap Pa, he would have to continuously transfer spiritual energy and mental energy into the realm of Thousand Wood. He had many spirit communication pills that could help him recover his spiritual energy, but it was difficult for him to recover his mental energy. Carving a level 6 battle formation consumes a lot of spiritual power. In my current state, I can maintain this state for 15 minutes at most. After 15 minutes, if they can't save Tu Shanhan and Hai Wudi and join hand with me to fight Pa, I will have no other choice. If Chinchuan used the Holy Ruler's armor and attacked Pa with the Flipping Sky Seal, he might be able to severely injure Pa and then find a chance to kill him. However, if he did that, he would be like an arrow at the end of its flight, and these people might do something to him. One must always be vigilant. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Chinchuan did not want to reveal too many of his trump cards. At the same time, the rescue of Tu Shanhan and Hai Wudi had reached a stalemate. They could not break the hollow cage at all. Even shaking the hollow cage was a difficult task. Octagonal flag. Hai Junlan used the octagonal flag again. The octagonal flag could seal all directions, but could also be used to break seals. The octagonal flag spun in the air and turned into a large red flag. She waved it at the hollow cage. The power of breaking seals made the hollow cage tremble, but it only trembled a little. There was no sign of it being broken. The octagonal flag can shake the hollow cage. When the hollow cage trembles, you must attack it with all your strength. You must break it. Hearing Hai Junlin's words, everyone agreed in unison. At a time like this, of course, they would not hold back. When Hai Junlin waved the flag again and made the cage tremble, nearly 100 Dongshu stage cultivators around her launched their moves together. All kinds of powerful spiritual powers struck on the cage, making the cage shake even more violently. Inside the cage, Hai Wudi and Tushan Han seized the opportunity to make their moves and finally broke the cage. After breaking free, Hai Wudi and Tushan Han rushed toward Pa, who was trapped in the realm of woods, without hesitation. They used the Heavenly King token and the Smoke Lock Cauldron respectively and attacked with all their strength. Bastard! Pa, who was trapped in the world of wood, sensed the danger coming from behind him and was immediately enraged. Dark purple flames ignited all over his body, igniting all the surrounding towering trees in an attempt to break out of the encirclement. At this moment, the smoke from the smoke lock cauldron locked Poe's body. A golden light shot out from the Heavenly King token and hit Pa, penetrating his body. Before the crowd could even rejoice, Pa broke the chains on his body and threw a punch at the Heavenly King medallion, forcing the Heavenly King medallion back. Chapter 1049. Facing Qin Xuan, Hai Wudi and Tushan Han, Pa showed that he was invincible. He yelled at Qin Xuan, "You can't defeat me." Poe's overbearing and domineering declaration did not cause Qin Xuan and the other two to have any thoughts of retreating. In fact, it did not even shake their resolve in the slightest. This was because they no longer had a path of retreat. If they did not take advantage of this opportunity to kill Pa today, they might never find such an opportunity in the future. Invincible! Hai Wudi growled. Thick gray scales slowly emerged from his body, making him bloated, but at the same time his defensive power was greatly improved. That was a special ability of the sea kind. The higher the cultivation level, the stronger the defensive power of the scales would be. The scales on Hai Wudi's body were as strong as middle-grade holy weapons in terms of defensive power. Kill! Hai Wudi raised his hand and released a sharp blade. He flashed across the air and dashed towards Pa. He wanted to fight Pa in close quarters with the help of his thick scales, so that Qin Xuan and Tushan Han could have a chance to kill him with one strike. Qin Xuan, Tushan, and Tushan didn't communicate with each other verbally, but when Hai Wudi rushed towards Pa, they understood his intention. Qin Xuan began shrinking the power of the world of woods, trying to concentrate on dealing more damage to Pa. Meanwhile, Tushan Han had been murmuring something in a low voice, seeming to be casting some kind of secret magic. Boom! Once Hai Wudi got close to Pa punched him back. He didn't even have time to wield his blade. At the moment, Hai Wudi was like a punching bag. He couldn't fight back at all. If he were an ordinary cultivator at the peak of Dongshu realm, he would have been killed by Pa long ago. But Hai Wudi was different. He had the protection of his scales, so he wouldn't be in danger for a while. Pa knew clearly that he had the upper hand now, but once Qin Xuan and Tushan Han joined the fight, the situation would turn against him. He had to kill Hai Wudi as soon as possible. However, the thick scales on Hai Wudi's body rendered most of his attacks useless, which made him very annoyed. If I had more void fire in my hands, I would definitely burn this guy to death. The fire of the void was a skill that only wizards could use. The fire of the void that Thompson used to break open the world of wood was sealed in his body by a wizard a long time ago. Now, he had used up all of it. Otherwise, he could have burned Invincible Hai to death instead of wasting his energy on him. Although Samson couldn't do anything to Invincible Hai for the time being, Invincible Hai wasn't feeling any better either. As the strongest man in Terang Nebula, it had been a long time since he felt so powerless to fight back. His nerves had become numb, and he could barely feel any pain. If this continued, his body would collapse completely. If he retreated now, all his previous efforts would be in vain. Fortunately, just as Hai Wudi was about to collapse, Qin Chuan and Tu Shan Han finally made their move. World of trees. Qin Chuan let out a low roar, and the countless trees that covered the starry sky immediately converged towards a single point, twisting together to form a gigantic hand that blotted out the sky. The gigantic hand slammed towards Puh, and the immense power seemed capable of crushing a planet. On the other side, Tu Shan Han took a deep breath and roared at Puh. Heaven! Puh couldn't help but tremble when he heard Tu Shan Han's roar, as if he had been greatly shocked. He stopped moving, and Hai Wudi took this opportunity to distance himself from Puh. At the same time, the giant hand under Qin Chuan's control grabbed Po's body and clenched into a fist. Countless sharp spikes grew out of it and stabbed towards Puh. Asterisk ka ka ka. Asterisk the giant hand continued to compress inward until it turned from a giant hand to a ball that was hundreds of feet in size. At this moment, everyone's eyes were fixed on the ball. They were all nervous and uneasy because no one knew if this move could kill Puh or not. Qin Chuan, Hai Wudi, and even Tu Shan Han, who seemed to be the most relaxed one among them, were all exhausted. They couldn't fight anymore. If this still can't kill Puh, we have no choice but to retreat. Hai Wudi retreated to Tu Shan Han's side and stared at the motionless ball with a serious look. He hoped that Puh had been crushed into pieces and nothing was left of him. Tu Shan Han's face was so pale that he didn't even have a trace of blood on it. Hearing Hai Wudi's words, Tu Shan Han pursed his lips and said, "The lethality of a level 6 battle formation is enough to severely injure or even kill any cultivator with the peak of the Dongxi realm. Back then, I used the Heaven's secret magic to suppress Puh, and that was enough for Qin Chuan to release the full power of a level 6 battle formation. If this still can't kill Puh, it only means that Puh is tough enough." Hai Wudi nodded in agreement. With the power of the world of wood, even if he was at his peak and protected by the scale armor, he would still be crushed into pieces. There was no way he could survive. However, Puh was still a member of the Void Empire. He was also a peak 4th level martial warrior, which was equivalent to the peak of the Dongxi realm. He might not necessarily die under this attack. Crack! A crack suddenly appeared on the ball. The crack was very small at first, but it quickly expanded, causing the ball to split into 2 hemispheres in an extremely short period of time. A large amount of dark purple blood flowed out from the 2 hemispheres. Everyone heaved a long sigh of relief when they saw this. Po's body had already disappeared and should have been completely pulverized. However, before they could even catch their breaths, the blood that flowed out of Po's body gathered in the air and transformed into a blood spirit. "You have angered me. You have thoroughly angered me." The blood spirit roared crazily. Its voice was as cold as the cold wind of hell, casting a shadow over everyone's heart. Puh was still alive. Everyone looked at Puh, who had turned into a blood spirit. His aura was still strong, and they all looked desperate. Even Tu Shan Han and Invincible Hai were no exception. They had tried their best, but Puh was too strong. Qin Chuan's gaze was extremely solemn as he stared at Puh, who had transformed into a blood spirit. His expression was extremely ugly. This fellow was simply too difficult to deal with. "You!" Sanguis abruptly turned his head and glared at Qin Chuan. "You are the one who destroyed my physical body, forcing me to be reborn in the form of Sanguis. I will kill you first to vent the hatred in my heart." Chapter 1050. When Sanguis turned his head to look at Qin Chuan already had a bad feeling. He subconsciously tried to retreat, but Sanguis crossed dozens of miles in a single step and appeared in front of Qin Chuan. His bloody hand turned into a sharp awl and pierced toward Qin Chuan's chest. Sizzle. At the critical moment, Qin Chuan dodged the fatal blow with thunder evasion. However, he had also completely exhausted the remaining spiritual energy in his body. His aura instantly withered. He did not even have time to take out a spirit culturing pill before he had to face Sanguis' second attack. God! Along with a furious roar, Sanguis' attack paused for a moment, which gave Qin Chuan a chance to catch his breath. While distancing himself from Sanguis, Qin Chuan consumed several spirit communication pellets in an attempt to recover his spiritual energy as soon as possible. Tushan Han, who had saved Qin Chuan at the critical moment, was now covered in sweat. His face was haggard and withered, like an old man who could die at any time. In order to save Qin Chuan, he had almost exhausted the last bit of energy in his body. At this moment, even an apotheosis stage cultivator could easily kill him. Retreat. At this moment, Hai Wudi had no choice but to give this order, which made him angry and ashamed. They had to retreat in the face of Sanguis, who was almost unkillable. If they all died here, Tron Nebula would really be finished. That universe overlord was supposed to arrive here in a few days, and he would be able to easily get rid of the threats and hidden dangers posed by the remnant army of the Void Empire. However, this had to happen at this very moment. He hated Blood Spirit to the core. Hearing Hai Wudi's order, they did not know whether to feel lucky or sad. If they retreated now, there was a great chance that they could leave this place alive and return to Tron Capital. However, some people might not be so lucky, such as Qin Chuan. At this time, Qin Chuan was being closely watched by Sanguis. There was no way he could retreat with them. If Qin Chuan came to their side, everyone's escape route would be blocked. Unless Qin Chuan wanted to drag them down with him, Qin Chuan would most likely not do such a thing. It was not that they did not want to support Qin Chuan and relieve the pressure on Qin Chuan. However, they really could not intervene in a battle of this level. Once they acted and attracted the attention of Sanguis, the consequences would be devastating. Human nature was selfish. Although they were grateful for what Qin Chuan had done, when the choice of life or death was placed in front of them, they unanimously chose life. I'm not leaving. However, there were always exceptions. Tushan Yu and 8 were the exceptions. They had long prepared to die. Even if their deaths could only buy Qin Chuan a few seconds of respite, it would be worth it. Before Hai Wudi could say anything, Tushan Yu and 8 had already rushed out of the crowd and charged at Sanguis. Qin Chuan sensed Tushan Yu and 8's movements. Before he could warn them not to come over, Sanguis had already made his move. A ball of his blood shot towards Tushan Yu and 8 like a cannonball, enveloping the defenseless duo and absorbing their energies in an instant. Then, the blood returned to Sanguis and merged with Sanguis' body, causing Sanguis' strength to soar by a notch. Sanguis' blood, what a delicious tonic. Sanguis grinned hideously. I really hope more people will come to support you. When Qin Chuan saw that Sanguis had eaten Tushan Yu and 8, leaving not even their bones behind, his eyes turned red. He roared and swung his sword. Although the Milky Way sword was powerful, it could not hurt Sanguis at all. On the other side, after everyone saw what happened to Tushan Yu and Ati, their faces were filled with terror. They all turned around and flew towards the spaceship in the distance. They wanted to escape, and no one could stop them from living. Bastard! Hai Wudi gnashed his teeth so hard that they almost broke. His eyes were filled with hatred as he glared at Sanguis. In this battle, the great majority manor had lost a commander and a deputy commander. It was a heavy loss. If they had won, it would have been fine, but they could not do anything to Sanguis. Tushan Han was filled with anger, but had nowhere to vent it. Because of this incident, the 3rd Elder, the 4th Elder, and the 5th Elder were all dead. Now, even Tushan Yu, the 7th Elder, was dead. More than half of the mainstays of the Tushan family had collapsed. If I can't avenge my dead brothers, I, Tushan Han, will be punished by the heavens. However, no matter how much Tushan Han and Hai Wudi hated Sanguis, the only thing they could do now was to retreat. They no longer had the strength to fight, and staying here would not help. As for Qin Chuan, they could not and could not save him. Between saving Qin Chuan and saving the lives of the majority, they had no choice but to choose the former. When Tushan Han and Hai Wudi left, Qin Chuan did not despair. Instead, he breathed a sigh of relief. Once everyone left, he could use his trump card without any scruples and kill Sanguis. Now, all he needed to do was to continue dealing with Sanguis and buy as much time as possible. However, while Qin Chuan wanted to buy time, Sanguis did not. He wanted to get rid of Qin Chuan as soon as possible, and then kill Tushan Han and Hai Wudi as well. That way, no one in Tron Nebula would be able to threaten him. He could then protect his void tentacles, build a portal, and patiently wait for his army to arrive. In order to achieve this goal, he must get rid of Qin Chuan as soon as possible. Die. Turn into my nutrients. Sanguis no longer dilly-dallying with Qin Chuan. He let out a deep roar, accelerated, and pounced on Qin Chuan, enveloped Qin Chuan, and tried to absorb Qin Chuan in the same way. However, things did not go as smoothly this time. A squarish bulge suddenly appeared on top of the blood ball and abruptly burst open the blood ball. The blood sphere burst open and Sanguis was severely injured. He let out a miserable shriek and hurriedly distanced himself from Qin Chuan. When he saw the bronze seal in Qin Chuan's hand, Sanguis could not help but reveal a look of shock. He exclaimed, "Cyclic seal? Why is the cyclic seal in your hand?" When he saw the cyclic seal in Qin Chuan's hand, Sanguis could not help but recall the time when he was sealed. That was the eternal shadow and fear in his heart. Qin Chuan did not answer Sanguis' question. Instead, he raised the cyclic seal and smashed it down on Sanguis' head. Fan Tianyun immediately transformed into the size of a small mountain and suppressed Sanguis. At this time, the army had not gone far. Qin Chuan had to end the battle quickly. He formed a hand seal and roared, "Immortal technique, cyclic seal." Chapter 10:51. Hearing Qin Chuan's angry roar, Sanguis could not help but reveal a look of horror on his face. He finally felt the threat of death. He had never thought that he would be able to witness the heaven-flipping seal, the famous immortal technique of the human tribe in ancient times. When the bronze seal fell, Sanguis did not even have the time to scream before he was turned into ashes. Qin Chuan didn't even have time to rejoice when he saw the blood spirit turn into ashes. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. His entire body was drained of strength. He didn't even have the strength to maintain the most basic flight. His body fell straight down. In the distance, although Hai Wudi, Tushan Han, and the others who were retreating sensed the powerful energy waves, they thought it was Sanguis trying to destroy Qin Chuan's last chance of survival. They did not expect Qin Chuan to be able to rebound and kill Sanguis. On another battlefield far away, the battle between the man in gray and Argentin was still going on. "Get out of my way." Argentin was a little angry and irritated. She really hated an opponent like the man in gray. He was shameless and shameless. "Give up, Argent King. I won't let you pass." The man in gray shook his head and said to Argentin, "You can't defeat me, and you can't get rid of me. Everything you're doing now is just a waste of energy." Although Argentin knew that the man in gray was telling the truth, Argentin was still very unhappy. She gnashed her teeth and said to the man in gray, "Fine, if I don't leave, you won't leave either. Even if I can't kill you today, I'll keep you here. No one can leave." The man in gray shook his head again and said to Argentin, "Don't be impulsive. You know that you can't stop me if I want to leave." Argentin was furious. Just as she was about to attack the man in gray, a light green shuttle slowly flew over from not far away. It seemed to be trying to fly past the two of them. Argentin frowned slightly. The gray-robed man had already made his move. With a wave of his hand, he wanted to send the shuttle into the collapsed space like he did with the other spaceships. However, to everyone's surprise, the shuttle dodged the attack. The gray-robed man was a little surprised. This flying shuttle was actually able to avoid the collapse of space. It was really unexpected. Argentin was also very surprised. This flying shuttle seemed to be a little strange. It was very different from ordinary flying shuttles. She glanced at the flying shuttle and found that it didn't seem to intend to turn back and escape. Instead, it accelerated and continued to move forward. Interesting, very interesting. The gray-robed man chuckled and made his move again. This time, the area of the collapse was larger and stronger. However, the light green spaceship only paused for a moment before it escaped from the collapse of space again. This time, the pilot of the spaceship seemed to have finally come to his senses. He immediately turned around and fled into the distance. At this moment, Argentin's figure suddenly appeared above the light green shuttle. She looked at the gray-robed man playfully and sneered, "I really didn't expect that your space law wouldn't work on a flying shuttle. Now, I'm going to follow this flying shuttle. Let's see what you can do." The gray-robed man didn't seem to expect such a thing to happen. He was a little angry. Just as he was about to use a stronger method to make Argentin and the flying shuttle stay, his optical computer suddenly received a message. When he saw the content of the message, he raised his hand and paused for a moment. He then gave up on continuing the chase. Instead, he chose to watch Argentin and the strange flying shuttle leave. In the distance, Argentin was ready to continue the fight with the gray-robed man. She didn't expect the gray-robed man to give up the chase. Although she was a little puzzled, she was relieved. No matter what, this was a good thing for her. The reason this guy appeared here must be because of the Void Empire. Maybe something happened at the cosmic vortex. I have to hurry over as soon as possible. Argentin looked down at the flying shuttle that was moving forward quickly under her feet. She reached out and gently knocked on the top of the flying shuttle. She said in a clear voice, "Friend, can we have a chat?" After Argentin finished speaking, a vigilant voice came from the flying shuttle. The voice asked, "Who are you?" Hearing this pleasant voice, Argentin smiled and replied, "I am an emissary from the celestial cluster. I came to Tron Nebula to destroy the remnants of the Void Empire." "I guess you must have heard about the remnants of the Void Empire? You are a universe overlord?" "That person is also a universe overlord." The person in the flying shuttle seemed to be very surprised. Of course, she knew about this. Someone who could fight with a universe overlord must be in existence of the same level. She had just escaped from the clutches of a universe overlord, which was more thrilling than walking through the gates of hell. "My name is Argentin. Silver King is my title." Argentin smiled. "We have talked so much. Are you not going to let me in?" The other party was silent for a moment. Argentin was not in a hurry. She waited patiently. Finally, an entrance slowly appeared under Argentin's feet. Seeing this, Argentin immediately jumped in and entered a cabin full of vitality. She looked around the cabin with curiosity. Finally, her eyes stopped on a beautiful woman in purple who stood in front of her. "This is the first time I have seen such a strange flying shuttle. Is this yours?" The beautiful woman shook her head and replied, "This belongs to a friend of mine. She is in the pilot's cabin, not here." Argentin nodded gently. Then she asked the beautiful woman, "What is your name?" "I see that you are heading in the same direction as me." This place was still a long distance away from the universe whirlpool. At this moment, the flying shuttle happened to be heading in the direction of the universe whirlpool. This might not be a coincidence. Hearing Argentin's words, the beautiful woman replied, "My name is Lucy. I am from the same star system. I am a humanoid. This time, I'm going near the universe whirlpool to find my boyfriend." Hearing Lucy's answer, Argentin could not help but show a touch of surprise. She asked, "You're going to find your boyfriend?" "Yes," Lucy replied. "He is the vanguard of the Tushan family. He went to the universe whirlpool a long time ago to find traces of the remnants of the Void Empire. I was only at the apotheosis stage before. My strength was not enough, so I did not go there with him. Now that I have reached the Dongshu stage, I can't help but want to find him." Hearing Lucy's answer, Argentin smiled and said, "You are a woman who values friendship and righteousness. But unfortunately, maybe your boyfriend is in danger." Lucy's expression suddenly became a little surprised. She asked, "Because of another universe overlord?" Chapter 1052. "You are very smart." Argentin nodded, and the expression on his face gradually became serious. He replied, "The origin of that universe overlord is mysterious. I don't know who sent him, but his purpose is very clear. He wants to stop me from going to the universe vortex to deal with the remnants of the Void Empire's army. Since he stopped me here, he must have taken other measures at the universe vortex. Maybe a war has already broken out." Hearing Argentin's words, Lucy was shocked. She immediately took out her photon computer and sent a message to Qin Chuan. However, Qin Chuan did not get a response from Qin Chuan. She anxiously waited for Qin Chuan's reply and comforted herself in a low voice. Maybe he is busy with other things, so he doesn't have time to take care of it. Seeing the worried look on Lu Zi's face, Argentin said indifferently, "You could try to get the people of the Tushan clan to contact the other members of the Tushan clan. Maybe you will get something." Lu Zi shook her head and replied, "I don't have the contact information of the other members of the Tushan clan." "Then forget it, but we have to go and see what is going on over there." Argentin sat down on a chair and said to Lu Zi, "I need to rest for a while. If you have any questions, you can continue to ask me." Lu Zi did not have any questions to ask Argentin. She just anxiously and nervously waited for Qin Chuan's reply. However, she waited for 3 days and did not receive any reply from Qin Chuan. Instead, she saw the retreating army. Lu Zi looked at the huge fleet ahead through the crystal screen and whispered, "This is the fleet that set off from the capital of Trump. Why are they here?" Argentin glanced at it and said indifferently, "The number of spaceships is less than I expected. Maybe they were damaged in the war. We will know if we stop them and ask. Open the hatch and let's go out." When the hatch opened, Argentin and Lu Zi immediately flew out towards the huge fleet ahead. At this time, the fleet had already discovered their tracks and issued a warning. "Report your name." Faced with the fleet's inquiry, Argentin calmly replied, "The Argentin King." The title Argent King seemed to have a very strange magic, causing the entire fleet to stop almost instantly. 2 figures flew out from a main ship at the front to welcome them. Their expressions were very respectful and filled with joy. "Your humble servant Hai Wudi pays his respects to the Argent King. Greetings, King of Argent." Hai Wudi and Tushan Han respectfully bowed to Argentin, seeming to be excited. Tushan Han's pale face reddened as well. Argentin looked at Hai Wudi and Tushan Han, frowned and asked, "Why are you here? What happened on the other side of the universe whirlpool? Why did you retreat?" Faced with Argentin's question, Hai Wudi's expression changed slightly, and then he answered, "The remnants of the Void Empire suddenly attacked and caught us off guard. We tried our best to resist, but we couldn't defeat them, so we had to retreat." Hearing that, Lu Zi, standing beside Argentin, finally couldn't help but ask, "Where is Qin Chuan? Where is he? Is he hurt?" Hearing Lu Zi mention Qin Chuan, Hai Wudi and Tushan Han's expressions became a bit gloomy. It seemed they were a bit embarrassed to speak, and they didn't know how to answer Lu Zi's question. Seeing Hai Wudi and Tushan Han's reaction, Lu Zi's face suddenly turned pale, and her eyes showed a touch of fear. At this time, many brave people in the fleet had already left the fleet and come outside to watch Argentin and the others. It was the first time they had seen a universe overlord, so they couldn't help but feel curious and excited. Argentin looked around and frowned. "Are these the warriors who went out with you? Why are all of them so healthy? Why aren't they injured at all?" They could avoid answering Lu Zi's question, but they didn't dare to not answer Argentin's question. Hai Wudi said in a low voice, "At that time, only cultivators above the Dongshu stage fought against the remnants of the Void Empire. Cultivators at the divinity stage weren't strong enough, so they didn't participate in the battle." Argentin sneered. "I've checked. There are 96 cultivators at the Dongshu stage in the crowd. I don't know how many of you went out this time, and how many were sacrificed. And why didn't you answer Lu Zi's question? Where's Qin Chuan?" Facing Argentin's sneer, Hai Wudi couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. He didn't know how to answer Argentin's question. Tushan Han sighed and said to Argentin, "Qin Chuan fought against the remnants of the Void Empire, General Pa. He was brave. When the army retreated, he took the initiative to cover our retreat." Now, Tushan Han didn't finish, but his meaning was clear. "Qin Chuan died in the battle." "That's impossible." Lu Zi refuted Tushan Han without thinking. Based on her understanding of Qin Chuan couldn't have died so easily. That's the truth. Tushan Han looked at Lu Zi. "My condolences. I don't believe it." Lu Zi shook her head again. "I know Qin Chuan. I know Qin Chuan better than any of you. Since you came back alive, Qin Chuan couldn't have died. You must have abandoned Qin Chuan and retreated when Qin Chuan was fighting against the remnants of the Void Empire, right?" Hearing Lu Zi's words, Tushan Han and Hai Wudi's faces darkened. Argentin saw Tushan Han and Hai Wudi's faces change. If he still couldn't figure out that they were lying, he would have lived in vain. "I'll give you one last chance. Tell the truth," Argentin said blandly. "If you keep lying to me, once I find out the truth, all of you will die." As Argentin's voice faded, an extremely terrifying pressure burst out from Argentin's body and covered everyone. At this moment, Hai Wudi, Tushan Han, and the others all felt that their throats were gripped. They were frightened and desperate. "Master, I'll tell you," Tushan Han sighed and told Argentin everything that happened before, daring not to hide anything. Hearing Tushan Han's story, Argentin's face turned dark. He gnashed his teeth and said, "So you didn't even have the courage to fight back? You abandoned Qin Chuan, just like that. You had tens of thousands of people, and you just watched a young man fight Thompson alone. Why can those two die so generously, but you can't?" Facing Argentin's question, Tushan Han and Hai Wudi both paled. They didn't dare to explain, because Argentin was telling the truth. They had tried their best, but the huge army behind them didn't. They just watched the fight. Chapter 1053. What a Hai Wudi! What a Tushan Han! What a Telung Nebula! Insu sneered. If it weren't for the fact that she still needed these people to support the Telung Nebula, she would have killed all of them with a slap. The people she hated most in her life were cowards who abandoned their companions on the battlefield. Whoosh! At this moment, Lu Zi suddenly turned and rushed toward the shuttle not far away. Argentin hurriedly asked, "Where are you going?" "I'm going to find him. He won't die." LVZ did not even turn her head back as she charged into the flying shuttle. Insu saw this and followed behind her. Soon, the flying shuttle was activated and flew towards the cosmic whirlpool. She left Tushan Han, Hai Wudi, and the others there. Hai Wudi and Tushan Han watched the shuttle leave quickly and remained silent. After a long time, Hai Wudi asked Tushan Han, "Brother Tushan, what should we do now?" Go back with him." Tushan Han sighed. "If the master really wants to blame us, the two of us will take the blame." Hai Wudi nodded and said nothing more. In the shuttle, Argentin looked at Lu Zi's pale face and did not know how to comfort Lu Zi. After these days of getting along, she had a good impression of Lu Zi. In addition, she had gotten rid of the gray robe man because of Lu Zi, so she felt that she owed Lu Zi a favor. At this time, seeing Lu Zi sad because of Qin Chuan, she felt uncomfortable. "He's dead. It's useless to be sad." Argentin sighed. "I didn't expect that these people in Tron Nebula would be so weak that they abandoned their companions and ran away. If they had stayed and fought side by side with Qin Chuan, they might have been able to kill Samson with a small price. But in the end, they were selfish and chose to preserve their strength." At this point, Argentin sneered and said disdainfully, "They must have known that I was on my way here and wanted to use my strength to eliminate Samson. That's why they were unwilling to sacrifice themselves. How hateful! Don't worry, I won't let these people who betrayed Qin Chuan go free." Faced with Argentin's comfort, Lu Zi shook her head and said, "I'm not particularly sad." Argentin frowned slightly and said, "You don't have to pretend to be strong." "I'm not pretending to be strong. I'm very calm because I know that Qin Chuan won't die." Lu Zi pursed her lips and said softly, "The most likely possibility is that he's injured and is waiting for me to save him somewhere." Argentin was stunned when he heard Lu Zi's words. He asked, "You're that confident?" Lu Zi shook her head again and replied, "This isn't confidence. It's just that I know Qin Chuan better than anyone else." Although she knew that Samson was a very powerful enemy from Tushan Han's description, Lu Zi believed that as long as Samson wasn't strong enough to kill Qin Chuan, there was no way he could kill Qin Chuan. She didn't know how many trump cards Qin Chuan had, but she was sure that Samson couldn't force Qin Chuan to the brink of death. Seeing Lu Zi's calm look, Argentin was a bit confused, but a couple of days ago, you were so uneasy. How come you calmed down now? A couple of days ago, I didn't know much about the enemy's power, so I was uneasy. But today, after hearing Elder Tushan's description and learning about the enemy's power, I was relieved. Samson is powerful, but not as powerful as Qinchuan. Lu Zi pursed her lips and said, "As for the rest, I can't tell you in detail." Hearing Lu Zi's explanation, Argentin couldn't help but cast a complicated glance at Lu Zi. Qinchuan is only at the early stage of the Dongxi realm. Even though he's a level 6 battle formation master, he wouldn't have a chance to carve a battle formation when Samson was on guard. To be honest, I don't think a slightly powerful early-stage Dongxi cultivator can kill Samson, who's at the peak of the Dongxi realm. If he can't kill Samson, Samson will definitely kill him. I know, I understand what you're saying. Lu Zi nodded, but we firmly believe that Qinchuan will be the final winner. Seeing the serious look on Lu Zi's face, Argentin was suddenly filled with endless curiosity about Qinchuan. She really wanted to know what kind of person Qinchuan was, that he could make Lu Zi trust him so much. With the speed of the flying shuttle, it only took them 5 days to arrive near the space whirlpool. Lu Zi and Argentin noticed the existence of the space barrier at the first moment. At this moment, there were only space tentacles and some space creatures within the space barrier. When she saw that the teleportation channel was not completed, Argentin temporarily lost interest in attacking the space barrier. She was prepared to search for Qinchuan with Lu Zi first. Samson didn't return to the space barrier. This means that he might really be dead. Argentin was a little surprised. She suddenly believed Lu Zi's words. Perhaps Qinchuan really did kill Samson. Baiyu, scan the surroundings and search for Qinchuan's traces. Got it. Baiyu controlled the flying shuttle and flew around the space whirlpool at an extremely fast speed, searching for Qinchuan's traces. However, after circling the space whirlpool once, Baiyu still couldn't find Qinchuan. After receiving Baiyu's reply, Lu Zi frowned slightly. She couldn't help but look at the endless space beneath her feet. She whispered, "Qinchuan might not be dead, but he must be in a terrible state. He might be unconscious and falling downwards." Although the universe was a vacuum and objects wouldn't be affected by gravity, this law didn't apply to living cultivators. Cultivators transcended the world, and some of the laws between heaven and earth couldn't restrict them. Therefore, if Qinchuan wasn't dead and was only unconscious, he might have already fallen downwards. Lu Zi flew downwards without hesitation. In order to determine Qinchuan's location, she didn't care about the factors around her and summoned the purple star godly eyes. She wanted to use the mutual connection between her dragon bloodline to determine Qinchuan's location. The purple star godly eyes could infinitely magnify the connection between her and Qinchuan. Argentin looked at the purple star godly eyes floating above Lu Zi's head, and a hint of surprise flashed through her eyes. She actually couldn't tell what level of treasure the purple star godly eyes was. Just as Argentin was curious about this, Lu Zi's face revealed a hint of joy. She cheered, "Found it!" On a piece of gravel below, a figure was lying quietly on it. Who else could it be but Qinchuan? Argentin also saw Qinchuan's existence at this time. She frowned slightly and said to Lu Zi, "Although he's still alive, his condition is extremely poor." "I know." Lu Zi nodded and said firmly, "But as long as he's still alive, I will do everything I can to save him." Chapter 10:54. Qinchuan's condition was worse than what Lu Zi and Argentin had imagined. After a simple examination of Qinchuan's condition, Argentin said to Lu Zi with a rather serious expression, "His Dantian's spiritual energy is completely depleted, his meridians are broken, and his brain is shattered. Although he's still alive and has a single breath left, it's no different from being dead." In Argentin's opinion, the reason why Qinchuan's body was so heavily injured was because he had truly gone all out during the battle with Samson. He didn't leave any leeway for himself, and after the battle ended, he was completely exhausted and relaxed, resulting in his current state. Lucy didn't respond to Argentin's opinion. What she needed to do now was to give the best medicine she had to Qin Chuan. After doing all this, Lucy turned to Argentin and said, "Senior, I'm willing to pay any price to buy the miraculous medicine in your hands. As long as it can save him, I'm willing to pay any price." When he heard Lu Zi's words, Argentin looked at Lu Zi meaningfully and asked, "You're really willing to pay any price? Even if I want you to leave him forever?" Lu Zi pursed her lips and replied, "I can only live if he's alive. If I can make his life better by leaving him, then I'll leave him." What an infatuated girl. Argentin smiled. He raised his hand and gently tapped Qin Chuan's chest, sending a strand of silvery white energy into Qin Chuan's body. Then he said to Lu Zi, "I've already preserved his last trace of life. As long as the energy I transferred to him doesn't disperse, he won't die. But if you want to wake him up, it will be very difficult. To be honest, there is no panacea in Tron Nebula that can save him. I don't have it on me either, but the celestial cluster must have it." Upon hearing Argentin's words, Lu Zi immediately asked, "Senior, can you take me to the celestial cluster?" Argentin took a deep look at Lu Zi and said, "The situation in the celestial cluster is very complicated, far more complicated than that in Tron Nebula. You're only at the early stage of Dongxi realm. Without any background to rely on, you're like an ant that can be crushed by anyone. Even if you're lucky enough to survive, you may not be able to find the panacea that can save him in 100 years. Upon hearing this, Lu Zi looked firmly at the unconscious Qin Chuan and said to Argentin, "If 100 years isn't enough, then 200 years, 1,000 years." Argentin looked at Lu Zi with a subtle gaze and asked, "Can you not change your mind for 1,000 years and guard this cripple? If you can really live for 1,000 years in the celestial cluster without dying, then perhaps you've already become an existence on the same level as me. At that time, the gap between you and Qin Chuan will become incomparably huge." "You don't understand." Lu Zi shook her head gently. "I won't change my mind." Looking at the firm and unshakable expression on Lu Zi's face, Argentin could not help but be a little surprised. She could see that the conviction in Lu Zi's heart was indestructible. Even if Lu Zi's bones were ground to dust, the conviction in her heart would not waver in the slightest. "I'm really curious about what happened between the two of you." Argentin looked at Lu Zi. "Can you tell me? In exchange, I can take you to the celestial cluster." Upon hearing Argentin's words, Lu Zi immediately said happily, "Thank you, Senior, for your help. Don't be in such a hurry to thank me. I can take you there, but he can't." Argentin pointed at Qin Chuan. His body is now very weak and can't withstand the turbulence of the teleportation formation. It's very likely that he will be torn to pieces during the teleportation, so he can only stay in Tron Nebula. Hearing this, Lu Zi's face immediately revealed a troubled expression. She was very worried about leaving Qin Chuan here alone. "You can entrust him to the Tushan family. With my orders, the Tushan family will definitely not dare to neglect him." Argentin smiled. "If you want to rely on your own strength to head to the celestial cluster, it will be very difficult. Even if everything goes smoothly for you, it might still take several years or even longer. I want to spend more time with him." Lu Zi reached out and gently stroked Qin Chuan's withered cheeks. "I don't want to leave him like this." Whenever she was alone, Lu Zi would always miss the time when she was studying at the Black Moon Combat Academy. At that time, she could spend almost every day with Qin Chuan, and they would not be separated no matter if it was eating or cultivating. At that time, she did not think that those days were very good, but now that she thought about it, she realized that those days were actually very beautiful. Now, she had finally caught up with Qin Chuan's progress. She thought that she could continue to accompany Qin Chuan, but she did not expect that what awaited them would be another farewell. 1 year. Give me 1 year. Lu Zi looked up at Argentin. "After 1 year, I will go to the celestial cluster with Senior." Argentin chuckled. "All right, let's do that." After finding Qin Chuan, the only thing left to deal with was the remnants of the Void Empire. For others, the Void Barrier might be indestructible, but for Argentin, it was as fragile as a piece of white paper and could be torn apart easily. The void tentacles should have been as powerful as the fusion stage, but because of the construction of the transmission channel, the power of the void tentacles had been consumed a lot. Although it took Argentin some effort to deal with the void tentacles, there was no big problem. When the remnants of the Void Empire were completely dealt with, Argentin looked around and patrolled around the cosmic whirlpool for a few days. After making sure that he did not miss anything, he was ready to return to Tehran City. A long time ago, Tu Shanhan and Hai Wudi had led people to the cosmic whirlpool. They had learned from Lu Zi that Po was dead, but he was not killed by Argentin. Instead, it was Qin Xuan who did his best to kill Po. If not for that, Qin Xuan would not have ended up like this. In other words, if they had not chosen to retreat in fear, but had fought Po with Qin Xuan would not have ended up like this. Of course, LVZ did not know what method Qin Xuan had used to kill Po. She did not know if these people would be of help or hindrance. Looking at the unconscious Qin Xuan, Tu Shanhan and Hai Wudi both felt guilty. Fortunately, Lu Zi gave them a chance to make up for it. Qin Xuan would be staying in Tu Mountain Villa for the time being. Lu Zi hoped that the Tu Shan family could take good care of Qin Xuan. Tu Shanhan promised her that the Tu Shan family would do their best to take good care of Qin Xuan. They would never let anything happen to Qin Xuan again. Lu Zi was not sure whether Tu Shanhan promised her because he felt guilty for Qin Xuan or because of Argentin's order, but as long as he could keep his promise, it would be fine. Lu Zi gently stroked Qin Xuan's cheek and said gently, "Give me some time. I will come back to save you. Wait for me." Chapter 1055. In the vast universe, a silver-white battleship was slowly moving forward. When a laser shot from afar, a circular defensive charm array appeared around the ship, blocking the laser. The next moment, dozens of lasers came from different angles, draining the power of the charm array. Warning, warning, the Voyager is under attack. The defense array is more than 30% depleted. Please be prepared for battle. When the alarm sounded through the broadcast, all the soldiers in the Voyager were ready for battle. They were clad in heavy armor and wielded standard weapons. They stood in rows in the corridor. As long as the enemy appeared within their attack range, they would open the hatch and rush out, killing the enemy without leaving a single piece of armor behind. They were the best of the best. The weakest of them was at least in the middle stage of the Dongxi realm. Unless a universe overlord came personally, no one would be able to fight them. In the past, this was what they thought. However, when a black battleship slowly appeared in front of them like a ghost, the confidence on everyone's face turned serious, and even despair. The Fortress-class battleship, the Dead Soul. This was a terrifying existence that made countless mercenaries tremble when they heard the name. This was because the Dead Soul belonged to the powerful queen of Night Serenity. She was the strongest Dongxu realm cultivator in the celestial cluster who was closest to the combination stage. Other than universe overlords, no Dongxu realm cultivator was her match. In the celestial cluster, the battleships were divided into 4 classes. They were Assault class, War class, Fortress class, and Carrier class. Just the powerful firepower of the Fortress class Dead Soul was enough to tear the Voyager apart. Their resistance was completely meaningless, so they chose to surrender. This was their only way to survive. When the Voyager stopped moving forward and resisting, the Dead Soul fleet also stopped attacking. A group of space pirates walked into the Voyager with smiles on their faces. Looking at the mercenaries who had already surrendered, they laughed. "I heard you were hired by the Ying clan to deliver a batch of very important treasures to the 49th district. Is that true?" The leader of the mercenaries, Naji, nodded and said with a trembling voice, "Yes. Where are the treasures? Tell me." Plank squatted in front of Naji and said with a smile, "Where you can tell me how many star stones this batch of treasures is worth. We'll calculate it according to first-grade star stones." Naji shook his head and said, "I'm not sure." After the treasure was sent to the flying ship, it was placed in the storage room. We didn't go in to see it. "Then lead the way. Show me the way." Plank smiled. "I like such surprises." Naji wiped off the cold sweat on his forehead. He turned around and led Plank and the rest to the storeroom. Although they had the advantage in numbers, they had no intention of resisting because they knew very well that resisting now was equivalent to courting death. When they arrived in front of the storage room, Najib skillfully entered the password and opened the door of the storage room. Plank thought they would see some precious treasures, but he didn't expect to see a black coffin. Seeing this black coffin, Plank was slightly stunned. He asked Naji, "Is this the treasure you were talking about?" Naji nodded and replied, "This is what the Een clan asked us to send to the 49th district. Other than that, there's nothing else." Plank could tell that Naji wasn't lying, but it was because of this that he felt strange. He didn't understand why the Een clan would be so cautious in hiring these guys to send a coffin to the 49th district. Could it be that the person lying in the coffin was an elder of the Een clan? But as the most well-informed space pirate, he didn't hear of any elder of the Een clan dying outside. Take it away. No matter what was in the coffin, they had to bring it back first. When Plank and the rest returned to the necromancer with the coffin, he raised his hand. The necromancer immediately shot out a psionic cannon and tore the defenseless Voyager into pieces. Seeing that the Voyager was destroyed and no one was left alive, Plank didn't feel guilty at all. They were space pirates. They killed people like flies. Plus, he never promised to let these guys go. When Plank and the others pushed open the gate of the lobby of the necromancer with the coffin, a loud noise surged out. In the spacious lobby, numerous people were exchanging cups, chatting loudly, and gobbling up meat. They came from different races, but they had the same identity. They were space pirates. "Yo, Plank, you finally realize that you're an unlucky guy. Have you prepared a coffin for yourself?" A guy who was as round as a meatball laughed at Plank and used the coffin to tease him. Plank heard this and said angrily, "Damn fatty, shut up. This is a trophy. This is the first time I heard of a trophy being a coffin." A guy with black poisonous snakes crawling all over his body came closer. He looked at the coffin and said to Plank, "I think this thing is suitable to be your bed." The sinister voice made Plank feel very uncomfortable. It was as if a snake was licking him. He glared at the other party and scolded, "Black snake, one day I will stew you into snake soup and eat you." What bad luck. Plank was pissed. He was already pissed that he had stolen coffin, and now he was being mocked by these guys. He really wanted to tear these guys' mouths apart if he could beat them. Plank walked forward and slowly carried the coffin to the end of the hall. He stood in front of a high platform. On the high platform, there was a throne made of pure black crystal. There was no one on it, but Plank looked at the black crystal throne with great respect. In fact, not only Plank, but everyone looked at the throne with great respect. This was because the throne belonged to their king, Queen Knight Serenity. A Tion people girl in a red dress, standing next to the high platform, smiled at Plank and said, "Her Majesty will be here soon." While speaking, the Tion people girl held a golden hammer in her hand and gently knocked on the golden gong beside her. The noisy hall quieted down almost as soon as the gong sounded, as if it had been rehearsed thousands of times. In fact, they had indeed done this thousands of times. Every time the gong sounded, it meant that Queen Knight Serenity was about to arrive. They had to put down everything in their hands and welcome Queen Knight Serenity with the most respectful attitude. If anyone dared to disrupt this ceremony, he would be expelled from the necromancer. The next day, his body would be sold by the bounty hunters in exchange for a high reward. Chapter 1056. There was a very special rule on the Dark Souls. Whenever someone plundered something, they could invite the Knight Serenity Queen to appraise the treasures. Not only would the Knight Serenity Queen not ask for any treasures, but she would also reward them. The better the treasure, the more generous the reward would be. This time, Plank got the opportunity to rob the Voyager. According to the usual practice, he would naturally invite the Knight Serenity Queen to appraise the treasure he plundered. But this time, the treasure he plundered was beyond everyone's expectations. It was a black coffin, but even so, everyone only laughed at Plank before the golden gong sounded. When the gong sounded, Everyone put away their previous unruly attitude and respectfully waited for the arrival of the Night Serenity Queen. This was the rule. Anyone who broke the rule would die. Tap, tap. Along with the crisp sound of high heels hitting the ground, a tall figure in a black dress slowly appeared in front of everyone. Her exposed snow-white and delicate legs were straight and slender, but no one dared to take a second look. She had long crimson hair that cascaded down to her ankles like a waterfall. Her face was covered by a silver mask. No one could see her true appearance, but everyone believed that the famous Night Serenity Queen must be an extremely beautiful woman. Under the respectful gaze of everyone, the Night Serenity Queen slowly sat on the black crystal throne. She looked indifferently at Plank, who was standing below the stage, and then turned to the black coffin. She didn't say anything, but Plank understood her meaning and stepped forward respectfully. "Your Majesty, I only brought back this coffin. It's a pity, and I'm very sorry." Hearing Plank's words, the Night Serenity Queen asked coldly, "What's inside?" "I don't know for now, but I suspect it should be a corpse." Plank said to the Night Serenity Queen, "Do you want to open the coffin now?" The Night Serenity Queen replied calmly, "Let's begin. It's been many years since I've encountered something so interesting." The Night Serenity Queen said that it was interesting, but from her voice and expression, she did not seem to be interested at all. Plank was helpless about this. If he had known that there was only one coffin in the warship, he would not have fought for this opportunity. Not only did he waste a chance, but he also could not show his face in front of the Night Serenity Queen, which was really frustrating. "Open it." Hearing Plank's order, the entourage immediately began to open the coffin. The coffin was not sealed, so it was very easy to open it. When the coffin lid was lifted, everyone stretched their necks to see what was lying inside. Those who were close to the coffin saw at a glance that there was a person lying in the coffin. It was a withered and almost lifeless person. It seemed to be a humanoid. Plank tried to see if there were any valuables on this man, but unfortunately, there was nothing around him. Fortunately, he was wearing a storage ring and a bronze ring on his hand, which seemed to be worth some money. Just when Plank was about to reach out and take off the two rings, the Night Serenity Queen suddenly said in a deep voice, "Don't touch him." Hearing the Night Serenity Queen's words, Plank stopped what he was doing. The others also looked up at the Night Serenity Queen with curiosity and confusion in their eyes. This was the first time they saw the Night Serenity Queen stop someone from inspecting her loot. Facing the puzzled eyes of the crowd, the Night Serenity Queen said to Plank after a moment of silence, "I want this person. This is for you." While speaking, the Night Serenity Queen threw something to Plank. When the crowd saw what it was, they couldn't help but breathe heavily. The Night Serenity Queen was willing to exchange a mid-grade sacred weapon for this person lying in the coffin. Although Plank didn't know what this person lying in the coffin could do to the Night Serenity Queen, since the Night Serenity Queen was willing to use an extremely precious mid-grade sacred weapon for the transaction, he naturally had no reason to refuse. "Your Majesty, he is yours." The Night Serenity Queen didn't pay any more attention to Plank. She waved her hand and signaled the guards to carry the coffin to the back. Then she said to the crowd in an indifferent tone, "Continue." After hearing the words of the Night Serenity Queen, the hall immediately returned to its previous noisy state. Everyone was toasting, eating, and chatting happily. But while chatting, they also looked at the Night Serenity Queen with curious eyes. They were very curious about why the Night Serenity Queen was willing to use a mid-grade sacred weapon to exchange for a dying person. But although they were curious, they still understood the rules. They would never ask about things that they shouldn't ask about. 2 hours later, the figure of the Night Serenity Queen disappeared silently. The hall was still lively. In the hall that belonged to the Night Serenity Queen, the open coffin was placed in the center of the hall. The Night Serenity Queen slowly walked to the coffin and looked at the figure lying in the coffin. Then she asked the Tian people in a red dress, "Linger, have you checked?" Hearing this, Linger nodded and replied, "I've checked. This person should have been seriously injured and exhausted in a battle, so he fainted. He was already at death's door, but someone used pure spiritual chi to protect his heart meridian, allowing him to survive until now. According to my calculations, he has been unconscious for at least 10 years. Hearing Ling Ori's answer, the Night Serenity Queen nodded gently and said, "Go and get the thing in the first cabinet." When Ling heard the Night Serenity Queen's order, she couldn't help but open her eyes wide and said, "Your Majesty, that is the treasure you kept for when you break through to the form synthesis stage. Are you going to use it on this useless person?" The Night Serenity Queen turned her head and looked at Ling deeply and said, "You are wrong. My hope of breaking through to the form synthesis stage is no longer in the first cabinet. It is in him." Ling looked at the Night Serenity Queen in astonishment. Then she couldn't help but look at the unconscious person. Her mind was full of question marks. How could such a dying person become the hope of the Queen to break through to the form synthesis stage? "Do as I say." The Night Serenity Queen's words woke Ling up. She immediately turned around and went to get the thing in the first cabinet. After Ling left, the Night Serenity Queen looked at the person lying in the coffin and said softly, "After so many years, I thought it was just my imagination. I didn't expect it to come true." Chapter 1057. Qingchuan had a dream, a very long dream. In the dream, he was moving forward in a dark world, trying to find a way out. However, no matter which direction he ran in, he could not find an exit or a way to leave this world. Day after day, year after year, Qingchuan's heart gradually turned from tough to numb. His legs, which were good at running, became staggered as if they were filled with lead. His eyes were dim and lifeless. Just when Qingchuan thought that he would never be able to leave this dark world and would die of old age, a ray of light suddenly appeared in his world. It was a ray of black light. He was clearly in a pitch-black world. He shouldn't have been able to see the black light, but he did. It was very strange and wonderful. When he tried to reach out and touch the black light, his world suddenly became bright. After sleeping for 10 years, Qingchuan opened his eyes for the first time. The moment Qingchuan opened his eyes, some dazzling light pierced into his eyes, causing him some discomfort. He subconsciously wanted to raise his hand to block the light, but his hand did not listen to the command of his brain. It was like a rusty machine that could not operate normally according to the system's command. When his eyes gradually adapted to the light, Qingchuan's eyes reflected a new thing. A person, a woman with a very cold temperament, wearing a silver mask. Facing Qingchuan's gaze, Night Serenity said indifferently, "How do you feel?" Hearing Night Serenity's words, Qingchuan opened his mouth, but no words came out. Night Serenity raised her hand and poured some light green liquid into Qingchuan's mouth. The liquid flowed down Qingchuan's throat and into his stomach. It was as if an electric current had reactivated Qingchuan's body. "Who are you?" Qingchuan looked at Night Serenity with a puzzled gaze. After sleeping for a long time, his memory of some things had become distorted. Perhaps he would need to wait until he completely recovered to sort everything out. "My name is Night Serenity, your savior." Night Serenity looked at Qingchuan with a subtle gaze. "You were asleep for a long time. It was I who saved you with the elixir." Upon hearing Night Serenity's words, Qingchuan froze for a moment before replying, "Thank you. Have a good rest and recall what happened in the past. Then I'll come to see you again." Night Serenity got up and walked outside. She wanted to give Qingchuan some independent space and time to think and recall. After Night Serenity left, Qingchuan closed his eyes and used his weak mental strength to sense his body's condition while recalling what had happened in the past. He vaguely remembered a battle between himself and Pa of the Void Empire. Even though he managed to kill Pa, he was severely injured and fainted. When he woke up, he was already here. I forced myself to use an immortal technique. It drained all the energy in my body, including my mental strength. That's why I fainted on the spot. As expected, it was too much for me to use an immortal technique in my condition. Qingchuan thought to himself, "I should have died on the spot. It was the runic sword that saved my brain." Qingchuan's brain was shattered, but the runic sword protected the core. Otherwise, he wouldn't have had the chance to wake up. When Qin Chuan suddenly used an immortal technique, the runic sword didn't even have time to react. Qin Chuan's energy was drained in an instant. Now that he thought about it, Qin Chuan still felt some lingering fear. If he had chosen a safer method to kill Pa, perhaps he wouldn't have ended up in such a sorry state. I should have used the little armored dragon to devour that guy. Qin Chuan sighed. If I'd known the aftereffects of an immortal technique would be so terrifying, I wouldn't have taken such a risk. After thinking about it for a while, Qin Chuan fell into a deep sleep. When he woke up again, his energy had finally recovered, and he saw night serenity again. I've already had someone check on your body. You're in a very bad condition. You've lost all your cultivation. You're no different from an ordinary person. Night serenity looked at Qin Chuan with a subtle gaze. You should be glad that you're a young man in your 30s. If it weren't for that, your body would have turned to dust when you lost all your energy. Qin Chuan pursed his lips when he heard Night Serenity's words. He said to Night Serenity, "Thank you for saving me. How long was I unconscious for?" "A very long time." Night Serenity didn't give a specific time. "It's a miracle that you woke up." As he spoke, Night Serenity picked up a syringe from the table beside him and inserted it into Qin Chuan's arm. He injected a red liquid into Qin Chuan's body. Qin Chuan only felt a warm current flowing through his body. It was very comfortable. This is a vitality potion that can only be found in Area 56. It can stimulate your body's vitality and make your body come back to life. Night Serenity put down the syringe and said to Qin Chuan, "Right now, you're still lingering on the edge of death. It's like the final radiance of the setting sun." Qin Chuan looked at Night Serenity curiously and asked, "Why did you pay such a price to save me? We don't seem to have anything to do with each other." "It didn't matter in the past, but it's different now." Night Serenity chuckled. "I saved you, so you owe me a life. I'm your benefactor." Qin Chuan couldn't refute Night Serenity's words because Night Serenity had said a lot. He did owe Night Serenity his life, but he didn't like owing others favors. So he asked frankly, "How do you want me to repay you?" "It's too early to talk about this. I'll use the best celestial cluster potion to heal your body and help you return to your peak. When the time comes, we'll talk about repaying the favor." Night Serenity looked at Qin Chuan and asked, "What do you think?" Qin Chuan frowned slightly and said to Night Serenity, "You said celestial cluster? Aren't we in Tron Nebula?" "This is indeed the Celestial Cluster. I'm a member of the Celestial Cluster, and now you're one too." Night Serenity said to Qin Chuan, "As for the Tron Nebula you mentioned, it's just a small place in the countryside. There's no need to miss it." Qin Chuan was speechless. The prosperous Tron Nebula was just a small place in the countryside in Night Serenity's eyes. How powerful and prosperous was the Celestial Cluster? "You need a rest now. If you have any questions for me, ask away." Night Serenity looked at Qin Chuan. "I'll continue to inject you with a potion later. You'll be very sleepy." Qin Chuan thought seriously and asked, "I want to know what you do." Night Serenity heard Qin Chuan's question, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He smiled playfully. "I'm a galactic pirate. To be precise, I'm a galactic pirate leader. I kill without batting an eye and do all kinds of evil. In the future, you'll also be a galactic pirate." Chapter 1058. This was the 30th day since Qin Chuan woke up. A month had passed, and he was injected with dozens of potions by Night Serenity every day. He did not know the origin of those potions and what they did, but he could clearly feel that his body was gradually recovering. Although he had not yet reached his peak, he was not far from it. At this time, Qin Chuan's brain was still in a state of collapse, but fortunately, he could use some of his mental power to connect the collapsed areas. He believed that it would not take long for his mental power to recover, and by then, he would have the power to protect himself. However, there was one thing that Qin Chuan did not understand. He just slept for a while. How did he wake up in the Celestial Cluster and become a galactic pirate? Night Serenity came to visit Qin Chuan at 10 o'clock in the morning as usual. She looked at Qin Chuan, who was sitting in a chair quietly reading a book, and asked, You are the person who is most eager to master knowledge among all the people I have ever met. Qin laughed and said to Knight Serenity, I just want to know more because I'm ignorant. Qin felt that since he had come to the celestial cluster, he should seriously learn about the celestial cluster. However, Qin underestimated the complexity of the celestial cluster. It was more complicated than 100-tron nebula added together. In the past month, Qin learned that the celestial star cluster was divided into 100 regions. Each region had a clear division of labor, and each region was as big as the city of Trump. However, this was only Qin's guess, because he didn't know much about the city of Trump, nor had he traveled all over the city of Trump. He just felt that the celestial star cluster, as the headquarters of the celestial clan, one of the powerful ancient clans, should be 100 times stronger than the city of Trump, whether in terms of strength or geographical area. Tell me, what have you learned? Knight Serenity looked at Qin. I seized these books to decorate the study. In fact, I haven't read them. Qin looked at the book in his hand and said with a smile, in today's technological era, this kind of bound book is as rare as antiques. If it wasn't for the habit I formed in the past, I'm afraid I wouldn't like to read books. Moreover, I found something very interesting in this book. As he spoke, Qin pulled out a rectangular piece of paper from under the book and placed it in front of Knight Serenity. This was a wanted poster, and the picture on it was none other than Knight Serenity. Meanwhile, the bounty for Knight Serenity was 10 million star stones. Take note, it was a first-grade star stone. In the celestial cluster, only first-grade star stones were used as hard currency. Second-grade and third-grade star stones could only be used to buy some ordinary things. It was almost impossible to buy good things with them. Where did you find this? Knight Serenity glanced at the wanted poster and said with a smile, this was already something from 10 years ago. Now my bounty is 16 million star stones. Qin clicked his tongue when he heard this and said, this is really too valuable. What? Could it be that you plan to become a bounty hunter after you recover from your injuries and capture me to exchange for the bounty? Knight Serenity looked at Qin as if he was very curious about how Qin would answer his question. Qin shook his head and said with a bitter smile, the reason why I have such injuries is because I fought with a profound emptiness realm expert. Although he died, I'm not any better. Therefore, before I have enough strength, I will definitely not fight with a profound emptiness realm expert. At first, Qin didn't understand Knight Serenity's strength. However, after his spiritual power recovered, he could see that Knight Serenity was at the profound emptiness realm. He was even stronger than Papa. So that's how you got your injuries. However, you should be proud of yourself for being able to kill a profound emptiness realm expert. Knight Serenity said indifferently, however, if you want to kill me, you'd better wait until you become a universe overlord. Only then will you have full confidence. Qin looked at Knight Serenity and asked, I've never liked to bite the hand that feeds me. Moreover, the person I killed was from the Void Empire. Do you know about the Void Empire? Of course I know about the Void Empire. Knight Serenity seemed to be surprised. You said you killed someone from the Void Empire? Qin nodded and answered, that's right. He was a profound emptiness realm expert. He was very strong. Qin didn't mind revealing some of his past. Firstly, he wanted to obtain more information from Knight Serenity. Secondly, he wanted to show Knight Serenity his strength and protect himself better. Although Knight Serenity had saved him, no one knew whether Knight Serenity would suddenly kill him one day. Therefore, he wanted Knight Serenity to be a little bit afraid of him, even if it was just a little bit. Hearing Qin's exact answer, Knight Serenity took a deep look at Qin and asked, can you tell me more about it? Qin thought for a while and then told Knight Serenity the whole process of the battle. Of course, he didn't omit the role of Tu Shanhan and Hai Wudi in the battle. He only omitted the flipping sky seal and the divine arts. A warrior from the Void Empire who can turn into a blood spirit must have a high status in the Void Empire. Knight Serenity looked at Qin with subtle eyes. If you can kill such an existence, you may be able to kill me. I said I wouldn't do that. Qin Chuan smiled. You are my savior. Qin Chuan paused for a moment and then asked, if I want to know more about the Void Empire, what kind of books should I read? Knight Serenity shook his head and said to Qin Chuan, you shouldn't read books. You should visit the Void Race. In this universe, no one knows the Void Empire better than the Void Race. Qin Chuan looked at Knight Serenity in surprise and asked, the Void Race? That powerful ancient race. Do they have something to do with the Void Empire? I don't know, but the Void Race has always been mysterious, and they look very similar to the people of the Void Empire. If they didn't hate the Void Empire to the core and would fight to the death every time they met the people of the Void Empire, we would almost think that they're the same kind of people as the Void Empire. Knight Serenity said faintly. But except when the Void Empire comes, very few people can see the Void Race in the outside world. Knight Serenity's words made Qin Chuan fall into deep thought. If Knight Serenity didn't mention it, he wouldn't have connected the Void Empire and the Void Race. Since the Void Empire and the Void Race both had the word void in their names, there must be a special relationship between the two. While Qin Chuan was thinking about this, Knight Serenity left. She felt that it was necessary for her to investigate Qin Chuan's past and understand more about Qin Chuan. Chapter 1059. At the explosion site of the war-grade spaceship Voyager, hundreds of workers were focused on collecting the wreckage of the spaceship, trying to extract useful information from it. Not far away, a tall figure dressed in a white robe with snow-white hair stood there. His gaze was gloomy as he looked at the wreckage that had been collected. He coldly said, "The Voyager has disappeared for a full 40 days. You idiots only discovered this matter now. Please calm down, young Master Dolan." The Yin clan's intelligence agents were in fear and trepidation, afraid that they would be punished. You know very well that the thing inside the Voyager is what Purple Dream Sanus needs. If you can't find it, even the clan leader won't be able to save you. Dolan said in a low voice, "I'll give you 1 month to find the real culprit. If you can't do it, then die." "Yes, young master. We will find the real culprit within a month." The intelligence agents' expressions were serious, and their tone was firm. They knew very well that if they couldn't do this well, they would really die. As time passed, Qin Chuan's injuries were finally fully healed. After learning about the celestial cluster, Qin Chuan also knew the names of the medicines that Knight Serenity used on him and how precious they were. During this period of time, he was like a gold-swallowing beast, consuming medicines worth millions of starstones. If it wasn't for Knight Serenity's help, he wouldn't have been able to recover to his peak state. It would be a miracle if he could even wake up. However, the more Knight Serenity invested in Qin Chuan, the more uneasy Qin Chuan felt. He always believed that there was no such thing as love for no reason in this world. He also didn't think that he was handsome enough to make someone as powerful as Knight Serenity fall in love with him at first sight. Therefore, he thought that there must be something on him that Knight Serenity desperately wanted. However, after thinking about it day and night, Qin Chuan still didn't think that there was anything on him that was worth Knight Serenity's schemes. "My storage ring has never been opened by anyone. No one knows what's inside. The rune sword, the little armor dragon, and the flipping sky seal are all in my brain. With the rune sword seal, no one can check my brain. Knight Serenity is probably not after these treasures. If that's the case, what else do I have that she would pay a huge price for?" Qin Chuan lowered his head and pondered. He was very puzzled. Just as Qin Chuan was thinking about this problem, Knight Serenity came. She sat in front of Qin Chuan and asked Qin Chuan, "How's your recovery?" Qin Chuan looked up at Knight Serenity and replied, "I'm recovering well." Qin Chuan knew that what was to come would come. Now that he had recovered, it was time for Knight Serenity to ask for repayment. Knight Serenity looked at Qin Chuan with a subtle gaze and asked, "Our agreement should still be valid, right? You owe me a life. You have to repay me." "Yes, always keep my word." Qin Chuan looked at Knight Serenity and asked, "What do you want?" Knight Serenity took a deep breath and looked deeply at Qin Chuan. She replied, "I want your blood essence. 10 drops." Hearing Night Serenity's condition, Qin Xuan could not help but reveal a look of understanding. No wonder Night Serenity would help him recover at all costs. It turned out that Night Serenity wanted his blood essence. Previously, I was wondering why you would spend so much effort to help me recover. Now I finally understand your thoughts. If it was me in my weakened state, I probably wouldn't be able to provide you with high-quality blood essence that you would be satisfied with. Qin Xuan looked deeply at Night Serenity and said, I'm just a little curious. What do you want my blood essence for? You really don't know? Or do you think your disguise is exquisite enough? Night Serenity stared straight at Qin Xuan. The bloodline of the ancient dragon clan is not so easy to hide, especially in a place like the Celestial Cluster. Hearing Night Serenity's words, Qin Xuan's expression changed drastically. His gaze towards Night Serenity suddenly became extremely sharp. He was even prepared to attack. Seeing Qin Xuan's reaction, Night Serenity smiled gently and said, It seems that my perception is not wrong. You really do have the bloodline of the ancient dragon clan. That is an opportunity that I can only dream of, but you have obtained it. Qin Xuan looked warily at Night Serenity and asked in a low voice, How did you know? At this time, Qin Xuan had already calmed down. This was Night Serenity's territory. Night Serenity was stronger than Samson. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he did not want to fight with Night Serenity. After all, it was Night Serenity who saved him. I said, I sensed it. Night Serenity looked at Qin Xuan and said with a complicated tone, Because we are the same kind of people. As he spoke, Night Serenity raised his hand and slowly took off the silver mask on his face, revealing a face full of dark purple scales in front of Qin Xuan. When Qin Xuan saw the scales on Night Serenity's face, he could not help but be stunned. He could tell that these scales were dragon scales. At this time, Qin Xuan finally understood why Night Serenity said that they were the same kind of people. It was because Night Serenity also had the bloodline of the dragon clan. Do you understand now? Night Serenity looked at Qin Xuan with his pitch-black eyes. We are companions. As he spoke, Night Serenity took off the black bracelet on his wrist. When the black bracelet left Night Serenity's body, Qin Xuan immediately sensed the aura of the dragon clan's bloodline from Night Serenity's body. At the same time, he could not help but feel closer to Night Serenity. In fact, Qin Xuan even felt a sense of superiority in his heart. No wonder you would save me. Qin Xuan pursed his lips and said, You asked me for my blood essence in order to evolve the bloodline of the dragon clan in your body and take the opportunity to break through to the form synthesis stage. Night Serenity nodded and said, That's right. Although I have the bloodline of the dragon clan in my body, it is heterogeneous and thin. But you're different. The bloodline of the dragon clan in your body is shockingly pure. If it were not for the suppression of the bloodline that prevents me from harming you, I would even want to suck all the blood in your body. Night Serenity was telling the truth. When Qin Xuan gradually began to recover, she had already had this thought in her mind. However, the suppression of the bloodline prevented her from coveting Qin Xuan. If it were not for this, she would have already attacked Qin Xuan. She would not have needed Qin Xuan to repay her kindness. It seems that the bloodline of the dragon clan saved my life. Qin Xuan smiled. I thought it was strange. As a galactic pirate, why would you be so friendly to a stranger like me for no reason? Now, everything makes sense. So, are you willing to fulfill your promise? Night Serenity looked at Qin Xuan. Now that you know everything, even if you don't want to give me your blood essence, I can't do anything to you. Chapter 1060. Night Serenity felt helpless. She wanted Qin Xuan's blood essence, but Qin Xuan didn't only have the dragon bloodline in his body. If she didn't make things clear, Qin Xuan probably wouldn't give it to her. But if she made things clear, she would be at a natural disadvantage. She could only pin her hopes on Qin Xuan keeping his promise. She didn't feel so helpless even when facing the overlords of the universe. Qin Xuan fell into silence in the face of Night Serenity's not-so-honest honesty. The living room was so quiet that there was almost no sound. It wasn't until 10 minutes later that Qin Xuan glanced at Night Serenity and said, "I can give you the blood essence, but not 10 drops." Night Serenity couldn't help but frown when she heard Qin Xuan's words. If she simply wanted to reach the form synthesis stage, she didn't need so much blood essence. But she wasn't satisfied with becoming an ordinary form synthesis stage cultivator. She wanted to improve the dragon bloodline in her body. Seeing Night Serenity's expression change, Qin Xuan asked, "What level do you think the dragon bloodline in my body is?" Night Serenity was slightly taken aback when she heard this. She hesitated for a moment before saying, "Could it be a second-generation subdragon?" In Night Serenity's opinion, Qin Xuan was already very lucky to be able to obtain the bloodline of a second-generation subdragon. As for a first-generation subdragon, or even a true dragon, she didn't dare to imagine at all because it was too exaggerated and too unbelievable. Qin Xuan didn't answer Night Serenity's question. He just glanced at the spacious living room. Then his body suddenly expanded and turned into a mini azure thunder dragon that was only 100 feet long. Night Serenity couldn't help but widen her eyes in horror when she saw Qin Xuan turn into an azure thunder dragon. Under the strong dragon power, her body trembled and she almost knelt down uncontrollably. She tried her best to resist, but she only knelt down on one knee. "Submit." At this moment, the dragon bloodline in Night Serenity's body uncontrollably expressed its submission to Qin Xuan. Night Serenity used all her strength to raise her head and look at Qin Xuan in disbelief. The five-clawed golden dragon that could only be seen in ancient books appeared in front of her like a dream. Qin Xuan slowly approached Night Serenity. He looked at Night Serenity with his golden vertical pupils and asked, "Now, do you still want 10 drops of my blood essence?" Night Serenity was already sweating profusely when she heard Qin Xuan's question. She held her breath and stared at Qin Xuan. She clenched her teeth and couldn't say a word. She was afraid that if she opened her mouth, her breath would disperse, and she would completely submit to Qin Xuan's dragon power. Seeing Night Serenity's reaction, Qin Xuan knew that the dragon bloodline in Night Serenity's body was suppressing her nature. If this continued, either Night Serenity would be crushed to death, or Night Serenity would break through the suppression of the bloodline and counterattack to kill him. No matter which outcome it wasn't a good thing for the current Qin Xuan. Therefore, he chose to return to his human form. When Qin Xuan returned to his human form, the huge pressure on Night Serenity receded like the tide. Night Serenity still maintained her kneeling posture. She gasped for breath and coughed violently, as if she wanted to vent all the fear that had seeped into her bones. She was afraid of death, and she was also afraid of submitting to anyone. After a long time, Night Serenity finally recovered. She slowly stood up and looked at Qin Xuan with a complicated gaze. She never thought that the dragon bloodline in Qin Xuan's body was the bloodline of a real dragon. One had to know that back then, when she obtained the bloodline of the fourth-generation Sky Dragon, she was already wild with joy. She felt that she had obtained a great opportunity. However, compared to Qin Xuan's opportunity, her opportunity could not even be considered trash. "I thought you would directly oppress me and make me submit to you." Night Serenity looked at Qin Xuan and said with a sigh of relief, "Why didn't you do that? A forcibly picked melon is not sweet. Besides, I don't think I'm qualified to make you submit to me." Qin Xuan smiled and said to Night Serenity, "What I did just now was just a test. I didn't mean to deal with you. I just wanted to protect myself. After all, you know my biggest secret. I can't be indifferent and be manipulated by you." Night Serenity nodded slightly and agreed with Qin Xuan's explanation. No matter who it was, they would probably make the same choice as Qin Xuan and display their strength to fight for their own benefits. "I thought you only had the bloodline of a second-generation dragon, so I asked for 10 drops of essence blood." Night Serenity took a deep breath and said, "If it's the bloodline of a real dragon, to be honest, I still feel like I'm living in a dream." Knight Serenity had been searching for a higher-level dragon bloodline for hundreds of years, but she had not found anything. She did not expect that her luck would change this time, and she would actually rob someone with the bloodline of a real dragon. She did not know whether she was lucky or not. The facts are in front of you. There's no need to dream. Qin Chuan looked at Knight Serenity. I can meet your conditions and give you a drop of the bloodline of a real dragon to help you smoothly transform and advance to the form synthesis stage. But I have my own request. Knight Serenity frowned slightly and asked, You want me to submit to you? Qin Chuan shook his head and said, Maybe you'll submit to me sooner or later, but it won't be now. I'll give you a drop of the essence blood of a real dragon in exchange for your protection for 10 years. What do you think? Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Knight Serenity could not help but fall into silence. 10 years was just a short time for someone with a long lifespan like her. It was totally worth it for Knight Serenity to exchange 10 years for a chance to advance to the form synthesis stage. However, from the bottom of her heart, she was unwilling to submit to anyone. If it were not for this, she would not have become a free star pirate. Seeing that Knight Serenity did not respond, Qin Chuan smiled and said to Knight Serenity, I've made a 10-year promise with many people, but most of them have been released before 10 years. Of course, this release does not mean death, but freedom. I'm growing faster than you think. Knight Serenity took a deep look at Qin Chuan and said, What if I want another drop of the bloodline of a real dragon? A drop of the bloodline of a real dragon could help Knight Serenity advance to the form synthesis stage and become an overlord of the universe. But her dragon bloodline could only be upgraded to the second-generation subdragon level at most. If it were in the past, she would be very satisfied, but now she longed to be stronger. For the time being, I can only give you a drop of the bloodline of a real dragon. Qin Chuan looked at Knight Serenity with a subtle expression. If you want more, sign a master-servant contract with me. It's also for 10 years, but in this way, you will completely lose your freedom and be completely obedient to me. Chapter 1061. As Qin Chuan's voice fell, the living room once again fell into a long silence. Qin Chuan was not in a hurry. He had the patience to wait for Knight Serenity to make a choice. No matter what choice Knight Serenity made, he would respect Knight Serenity. Moreover, he did not feel that he was at a disadvantage. His life was saved by Knight Serenity. Now he was using the condition of repaying her kindness in exchange for 10 years of freedom for Knight Serenity. It was a completely profitable deal. Qin Chuan also knew that the true dragon's blood essence was very precious. It was an extremely rare treasure for anyone, but it was not rare for him. Therefore, he was willing to use the extra true dragon's blood essence in exchange for 10 years of freedom for a powerful cultivator who was about to advance to the form synthesis stage. Qin Chuan appeared to be calm, but Knight Serenity was very conflicted. She had not experienced this kind of dilemma for too many years. A drop of true dragon's blood essence can help me advance to the form synthesis stage, but in this way, my bloodline can barely be regarded as a second-generation sky dragon. My strength can only be regarded as average in the form synthesis stage. However, if I can improve my bloodline to the level of a first-generation sky dragon, not only will my strength soar, but my potential will also become incomparably huge. 10 years is very short. It will pass in the blink of an eye. In 10 years, I can regain my freedom. At that time, I will be the queen of Knight Serenity again. I will not be anyone's slave. 10 years. 10 years it is. Finally, the expression on Knight Serenity's face gradually became firm. She turned her head to look at Qin Chuan and said in a deep voice, Give me 3 drops of true dragon's blood essence, and I will sell myself to you for 10 years. I will be at your disposal. After receiving Knight Serenity's reply, Qin Chuan looked at Knight Serenity with a subtle expression and asked, I said 1 extra drop, not 2. You should know how precious the true dragon's blood essence is. I can't give you an extra drop. Although Qin Chuan didn't lack true dragon blood essence, it didn't mean that he would give it away casually. I'll submit to you. But I'm not the only one who is loyal to you. All the space pirates on the Dead Souls are loyal to you. Even the weakest of them is in the early stage of the Dongshi realm. Every one of them is of great use. Knight Serenity looked at Qin Xuan and said in a firm tone, "The Fortress-class Necromancer will also be your ride." After hearing Knight Serenity's words, Qin Xuan took a deep look at Knight Serenity and didn't say anything else. Instead, he condensed a contract with his spiritual energy. As long as Knight Serenity fused a strand of his spiritual energy into it, their contract would come into effect. No matter who violated the contract, they would be punished by the heavens. Since he had already made his decision, Knight Serenity did not hesitate to infuse a wisp of his spiritual energy into it, and successfully formed a contract with Qin Xuan. On a barren and lifeless planet, Knight Serenity stood in the air and looked at Qin Xuan beside her. She said excitedly, "This is the place I chose 300 years ago to advance to the form synthesis stage. After 300 years, I can finally fulfill my original wish." Hearing this, Qin Xuan smiled. He raised his hand and sent 3 drops of golden true dragon blood essence to Knight Serenity. Then he said, "I'm looking forward to it." Looking at the 3 drops of true dragon blood essence handed to her by Qin Xuan, Knight Serenity's eyes flashed with desire. She sucked the 3 drops of true dragon blood essence into her mouth. The magnificent power contained in the true dragon blood essence exploded instantly, causing Knight Serenity's aura to soar into the sky. Rumble. The terrifying dark tribulation cloud condensed almost instantly and let out a deafening roar. At this time, Qin Xuan was already far away from Knight Serenity. Although he had the law of thunder, he did not have the courage to test the terrifying existence of the form synthesis thunder tribulation. At this time, not only was Qin Xuan watching Knight Serenity's tribulation, but all the space pirates on the Necromancer were also watching Knight Serenity's tribulation. Everyone's face was full of excitement and yearning. Although they knew that Knight Serenity would advance to the form synthesis stage sooner or later, when the day really came, they were still very excited. It was as if they were the ones who were going through the tribulation. Once Knight Serenity succeeded, she would become the first space pirate in the history of the Celestial Cluster to reach the form synthesis stage. Rumble. With a roar of thunder, Knight Serenity's form synthesis thunder tribulation began. When the 8th lightning tribulation fell, the dark tribulation cloud began to dissipate slowly and the sky became clear again. Qin Xuan saw this scene from afar and could not help but feel a little regretful. With Knight Serenity's talent and 3 drops of true dragon blood essence, she still failed to trigger the mysterious Heaven 9 tribulations. This was very regrettable. However, when he saw Knight Serenity's miserable state, Qin Xuan felt that it was fortunate that Knight Serenity did not trigger the mysterious Heaven 9 tribulations. Otherwise, she might not have survived. At this time, Knight Serenity's body was covered in blood. She was almost unrecognizable. If it were not for her aura, Qin Xuan would have thought that she was already dead. When the destructive power of the 8th lightning tribulation gradually dissipated, Knight Serenity's body began to slowly recover. Her aura gradually became stronger and more terrifying. Roar! Yi let out a roar, and her body suddenly turned into a black and purple dragon. She spread her wings and roared at the sky. Black flames spewed out of her mouth, causing the entire planet to tremble. This was the power of the form synthesis stage. It was enough to dominate a region in the universe. After venting to her heart's content, Knight Serenity returned to her human form. This time, the scales on her face disappeared, revealing her original appearance. She was a woman with delicate and seductive facial features. The dragon scales turned into armor and wrapped Knight Serenity's body. It set off her tight waist, full breasts, and full buttocks. She was perfect and flawless. At this time, although Knight Serenity was only at the early form synthesis stage, even some veteran form synthesis stage powerhouses might not be a match for Knight Serenity. This was the power of the Dragon Clan's bloodline for Knight Serenity. Is this the form synthesis stage? Night Serenity felt the surging power in her body and couldn't help but show a satisfied expression. She liked the feeling of having superpower. Now, she was strong enough to dominate the celestial cluster. She didn't even have to retreat when facing the Tion people. After carefully experiencing the powerful power in her body, Night Serenity slowly turned her head and looked at Qin Chuan, her nominal master. Although she had become an overlord in the universe, she had to serve Qin Chuan as a slave for 10 years. Thinking of this, Night Serenity slowly walked toward Qin Chuan. With every step she took toward Qin Chuan, her aura became stronger. In the face of Night Serenity, Qin Chuan stood still. His face was expressionless and calm. When Night Serenity was less than 10 meters away from Qin Chuan, she finally stopped and looked at Qin Chuan with her golden vertical pupils, which were the symbol of the Dragon Clan. Those were the symbols that Qin Chuan had given to her. She bent down, lowered her noble head, and placed her hand on her chest. Night Serenity. Greetings, Master. Chapter 1062. Necro. Qin Chuan looked at Night Serenity, who was standing in front of him, and smiled. You don't have to be so reserved. We can sit down and talk. Just treat it as a meeting between friends. I never liked the feeling of being superior to others. Night Serenity didn't say anything after hearing Qin Chuan's words. She didn't sit down either. In her opinion, since she had signed a master-servant contract with Qin Chuan, she was his servant. She should act like a servant. Sitting on the same level as Qin Chuan was overstepping her authority. Seeing that Night Serenity wasn't moved, Qin Chuan sighed helplessly and said, If that's the case, then let's begin. I want to know how you saved me and how we came to the Celestial Cluster. Qin Chuan had a lot of doubts about this matter before. As a galactic pirate of the Celestial Cluster, Night Serenity really had no reason to go to Tron Nebula. Moreover, she went to a remote corner like the Cosmic Vortex. There were too many suspicious points. Facing Qin Chuan's question, Night Serenity answered honestly, You came to the Necro as a spoil of war, and then I found you. Qin Chuan was stunned. Puzzled, he asked, Spoil of war? You were in a coffin at the time. A group of mercenaries transported you to the Yin clan in Area 49. Someone got the news and planned this robbery. Then you became a spoil of war. Night Serenity explained to Qin Chuan. After that, I used some precious medicine to save you. Hearing Night Serenity's words, Qin Chuan couldn't help but be stunned. He only remembered that he fainted after the battle with Senator. When he woke up, he was on the Necro. As for the coffin and the Yin clan, he had no recollection at all. Qin Chuan frowned slightly and asked, Was there anything else in the coffin other than me? Night Serenity shook her head and answered, No. Tell me about the Yin clan. Qin Chuan felt that if he wanted to understand what was going on, he needed to understand the Yin clan. Tell me everything you know. Night Serenity replied, The Silver Clan is one of the many clans in the Celestial Cluster. Because of the existence of the Silver Queen, they have become one of the strongest clans in the Celestial Cluster. They have a very high status in the Celestial Cluster. The biggest characteristic of the Silver Clan is that their fur is silver white, and even their eyes are silver white. The Silver Clan is stationed in Area 49, and they are the rulers of the area. Hearing Night Serenity's words, Qin Chuan asked, Is the Silver Queen at the form synthesis stage? Night Serenity nodded and replied, The Silver Queen has been famous for thousands of years. She is a veteran of the form synthesis stage and one of the most well-known overlords in the universe. Qin Chuan pondered for a moment and asked, In the past few years, has the Silver Queen ever left the Celestial Cluster and went to Tron Nebula? Qin Chuan didn't think that he had any chance of interacting with the Yin clan. If he had to pick a time, it would probably be during the incident with the remnants of the Void Empire. He clearly remembered that at that time, a universe overlord had already arrived in Tron Nebula and was rushing to the universe whirlpool. It was also at that time that the battle between the Yin clan and Sun broke out. At that time, he only heard the news, but he didn't ask about the origin of the universe overlord. Perhaps that universe overlord was the Silver Queen. If he could figure this out, then some things would make sense. I don't know. Knight Serenity shook his head and said to Qin Xuan, the incident with the Void Empire that you mentioned didn't spread in the celestial cluster. If you hadn't mentioned it, I wouldn't have known about it. If there really was a universe overlord that arrived in Tron Nebula, then it should have been a secret operation. The news wouldn't have leaked out. It seems that if I want to know about these things, I'll have to ask the people in Tron Nebula. Qin Xuan took out his photon computer and glanced at it. In the past, he had thought about contacting the people in Tron Nebula, but he didn't do anything because he was afraid of Knight Serenity. There were some things that he didn't dare to look into. Now, things were different. Knight Serenity had become one of them, so he didn't have any other concerns. However, before that, he still wanted to contact Lu Zi. To Qin Xuan's surprise, there was no response. When he tried to contact Lin and Bai Yu, there was no response either. This gave Qin Xuan a bad feeling. When he tried to contact the people of the Tushan clan, there was still no response. I didn't get any response. Not even one. This is very strange. After checking the photon computer, Qin Xuan confirmed that there was nothing wrong with it. In that case, the problem must be with someone else. Qin Xuan looked up at Knight Serenity and asked, could it be that the photon computer signal is not good, so there's a problem with receiving messages? When Knight Serenity heard Qin Xuan's words, the way he looked at Qin Xuan suddenly became very strange. The expression on his face also became very interesting, as if he didn't know how to answer Qin Xuan's question. Seeing this, Qin Xuan also understood that he had asked a very stupid question. I can't contact them. It seems that I have to go to Area 49. I have to figure out this matter. If there's a chance, I'll go back to Tron Nebula. I must find Little Violet and the others. Tron Capital. The black-robed man stood in the air, looking at the steel city under his feet. He looked at the people who were wailing in despair under the devastation of the Zerg swarm. There was no pity in his eyes, only endless coldness and cruelty. Without any warning, Zerg's army arrived at Tron Capital and launched a unilateral massacre. In just one night, the once prosperous and lively Tron Capital became a dead city. The powerful Metropolis Mansion and Two Mountain Manor were the worst-hit areas. They were the first to be breached. Hai Wudi died in battle, and Tu Shanhan died by self-explosion. Whether it was the people who were hiding or the people who were kneeling and begging for mercy, they all died under the attack of the Zerg swarm. No one was spared. You bastards! You are all beasts. You will die a horrible death. Hai Junlan was tied up and sent to the black-robed man. His eyes were blood-red, staring at the black-robed man standing in front of him, as if he wanted to eat him alive. Facing Hai Junlan's cursing, the black-robed man asked calmly, "Do you know why we didn't kill you, but chose to capture you alive?" "I don't want to know." Hai Junlan gritted his teeth. If the spiritual power in his body had not been sealed, he would have already self-exploded. What a pitiful person. The black-robed man looked at Hai Junlan. "Don't you want to know why we slaughtered Tron Capital?" Hearing the black-robed man's words, Hai Junlan roared, "Tell me why." The black-robed man laughed and replied, "Because we are looking for someone. You know him. His name is Qin Xuan." Chapter 1063. Qin Xuan really wanted to go to the core area of the celestial cluster, Stansos, to broaden his horizons. Unfortunately, the Dead Spirit ship was the famous Knight Serenity Queen's ship, so it couldn't get close to Stansos. Once it got close, it would definitely become the target of public criticism and be attacked. This was a treatment only galactic pirates had, so if Qin Xuan wanted to go to Stansos, it would be best for him to take a shuttle to Stansos in a low-key manner. As Qin Xuan's personal bodyguard, Knight Serenity would naturally follow Qin Xuan to Stansos. Stansos is the core area of the celestial cluster. It is divided into 100 areas. The lowest is the 99th area, and the highest is the first area. The first area is the core of the Tian people. Other than the direct descendants of the Tian people, no one can get close to the first area. Once they do, they will be treated as intruders and attacked. Even universe overlords are no exception. Chuan looked at the information on stanzos through the photon computer and asked Night Serenity, "Do the other areas have the same restrictions?" Stanzos has a strict hierarchy. Only those with a pass can enter the area. As a galactic pirate, I only have passes for the 56th and 99th areas. We can only go to these two places. Night Serenity looked at Chuan and said, "If you want to go to the 49th area, you will have to find another way. It's best if you can get a referral from the race." Chuan frowned slightly and asked, "Is it hard to get a pass?" "Some are hard, some are not." Night Serenity explained to Chuan, "The reason I have passes for the 56th and 99th areas is because the 56th area is the center of Stanzo's medicine. As long as you have star stones, you can buy any medicine you want in the 56th area. The medicine that was used to save you all came from the 56th area. As for the 99th sector, it is the most chaotic and lawless place in Stanzos. Anyone can enter and leave the 99th sector freely. No one will care about your background. All they care about is whether you have good stuff and whether you're strong enough. We have always liked to sell our loot in the 99th sector's black market." Hearing Night Serenity's words, Chuan grinned and said, "So you only have a pass for the 56th area, right?" Night Serenity nodded and said, "That's right. That. Then let's go to the 99th area and take a look." Chuan smiled. "I am very curious to see how chaotic the 99th area is." Night Serenity looked at Chuan and said, "With your realm, you will definitely become a fat sheep in everyone's eyes when you reach the 99th area. If you dare to reveal anything of value, your head will appear in a trash bin on the street before night falls. Of course, I know your actual combat strength is very strong and you won't be killed that easily. However, you will definitely suffer a lot of harassment. Definitely." Chuan looked at Night Serenity curiously and asked, "Have you also encountered such a situation before?" Night Serenity was silent for a moment and replied, "I came from the 99th area. No one knows the rules there better than I do." After hearing Night Serenity's description, Chuan thought that the 99th area would be a very chaotic and dirty place. However, when Chuan arrived at the starport of the 99th area, what he saw was a bustling metropolis. The ground was even spotless. "Are you sure this is the most chaotic place in Stanzos?" Chuan was a little doubtful. "I think this place is even more advanced than Tron City. Although I have never been to Tron City, I can assure you that in Stanzos, even the trashiest 99th area is not comparable to the capitals of the lower nebulas." Night Serenity said to Chuan, "What you said is disrespectful to the celestial cluster and blasphemous to Stanzos." "Okay." Chuan shrugged. Let's go. Let's go in and take a look." Chuan and Night Serenity leisurely walked out of the port together. Before they could go far, the shuttle parked at the port had already been driven away. Chuan looked back at the shuttle in the distance and raised his eyebrows slightly. "So blatant?" Night Serenity said to Chuan, "Unless your shuttle has the mark of a powerful force, it is equivalent to an ownerless object in the 99th area. When we leave, we can also rob other people's shuttles or even spaceships. As long as you are strong enough, you can get anything here." Chuan asked curiously, "Is no one going to take care of it?" "If no one takes care of it, the ground here should be flowing with blood instead of being clean and spotless." Night Serenity said to Chuan, "The 99th area belongs to the Chaos Overlord. Like the Argent King, he is a veteran overlord who has been famous for more than 1,000 years." A water spirit in a well-ironed suit came to Chuan and Night Serenity's side and asked with a smile, "Sir, madam, do you need a tour guide?" Chuan glanced at the water spirit in front of him and then looked at Night Serenity. Night Serenity understood Chuan's meaning and explained indifferently. The Chaos Overlord is a water spirit. These water spirits are attached to the Chaos Overlord. You can think of them as subordinates of the Chaos Overlord. Here, no one dares to make a move on the water spirit. As long as you hire them as tour guides, it is equivalent to spending money to buy a protective talisman. No one dares to make a move on you. Otherwise, it would be disrespectful to the Chaos Overlord. Of course, the price to hire them is sky high. It costs 10,000 first-grade star stones per day. Although it is expensive, it is nothing compared to your life. When the water spirit heard Knight Serenity's words, he smiled faintly and said to Qin Chuan, "This madam is right. No one dares to make a move on the water spirit here. We will provide the safest and most considerate service to our employer." Qin Chuan glanced at the slowly flowing water spirit and smiled faintly. "My purpose in coming here is to see how chaotic the 99th area is. Hiring you would go against my original intention." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, the water spirit didn't continue to pester him. He took a step back and said, "Then I wish Mr. a good time." Qin Chuan lifted his foot and walked forward. When he was far away, he said to Knight Serenity, "Will they think of me as a fool who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth?" "Probably." Knight Serenity looked around and asked Qin Chuan, "Where do you plan to go first?" Qin Chuan thought for a moment and replied, "First, we need a means of transportation. As for the destination, let's go to the most famous black market." Knight Serenity raised his hand and called for a flying shuttle from the roadside. The pilot of the flying shuttle was also a water spirit. But unlike the friendly tour guide, this water spirit was very fierce and didn't seem easy to get along with. Chapter 1064. Qin Chuan looked at the hot-tempered shuttle pilot and asked Knight Serenity with some doubts. They are both water spirits, but why is this guy so much more hot-tempered than the previous one? Is it only because of his personality? Knight Serenity shook her head and explained, "It's not because of his personality, it's because of his position. In the 99th district, most of the water spirits are working in the service industry. Among them, the most profitable job is being a tour guide, and the worst job is being a shuttle pilot." Hearing Knight Serenity's explanation, Qin Chuan understood. It turned out that the bad temper of the shuttle pilot was not directed at him, but at this job that had no profit to be made. Their jobs are generally decided by drawing lots, and they change positions once a year. At first, it was still fine, but as they work longer and longer in this job, their tempers naturally become worse and worse. After all, no one would not be envious when they see others making money. While talking, Qin Chuan and Knight Serenity had already boarded the shuttle and began to advance towards the biggest black market in the 99th district. They only needed to pay the shuttle pilot 10 first-grade star stones as the fare. Compared to the tour guide who asked for 10,000 first-grade star stones, this job was indeed not that profitable. The 99th district was very big, and Qin Chuan could take advantage of this opportunity to properly appreciate the scenery of the 99th district through the window. What made Qin Chuan surprised, but also felt that it was reasonable, was that there were almost no pedestrians on the streets of the 99th district. Most of the people came and went by shuttle, and among the few pedestrians, more than half of them were water spirits. He saw with his own eyes that a middle-stage Dongshu realm inferior demon suddenly disappeared when he reached a street corner. Knight Serenity also saw this scene. She said to Qin Chuan, "That inferior demon is dead for sure. It doesn't matter if he has money or not. He won't be able to survive." Why didn't he choose to take the shuttle? Qin Chuan was a little curious. Since he has come to the 99th district, he shouldn't have not even 10 first-grade star stones, right? He definitely doesn't understand the 99th district. Maybe it's his first time here like you. He was deceived by the clean and tidy streets, thinking that the 99th district isn't as chaotic as the rumors say. So he chose to walk in order to save 10 first-class star stones. Those people who attacked him must have targeted him when he walked out of the harbor. They only made their move after confirming that this guy isn't dangerous. Knight Serenity was very familiar with this matter, explaining it to Qin Chuan clearly and logically. Qin Chuan looked at Knight Serenity and asked, "Have you done something like this before?" Knight Serenity nodded and said honestly, "At least 10,000 people have died in my hands from hundreds of different races. I've also killed a lot of people, but I'm different from you. Most of the people who died in my hands were Zerg." Qin Chuan grinned. "As long as the people of other races don't provoke me, I rarely take the initiative to attack. Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Knight Serenity looked at Qin Chuan subtly and asked, Zerg, do you have a grudge against them? You also think that they are Zerg and not the Holy Clan? That's good. Qin Chuan smiled and didn't explain too much. He simply said, I hate this hypocritical race that calls themselves the Holy Clan. If I have the chance, I really want to kill them all. Qin Chuan had never been a bloodthirsty person, but he definitely wouldn't show mercy to Zerg. Of course, Little Armor Dragon was an exception. Knight Serenity heard Qin Chuan's words and tactfully didn't ask any more questions. Along the way, other than that unlucky inferior demon, Qin Chuan didn't see a second person who was killed. After about 2 hours, they were sent to the front of a huge hall. This was the entrance to the largest black market in the 99th district. There were 9 other entrances like this. Qin Chuan and Knight Serenity got off the shuttle and walked towards the black market. At the entrance, they met the water spirit again, but this time it wasn't the tour guide or the shuttle pilot, but the black market guide. The black market guide can help you find what you want at the fastest speed, and the price is definitely the most reasonable. But correspondingly, the price to hire them isn't cheap either. They also cost 10,000 first-grade star stones. Knight Serenity said to Qin Chuan, if you have something you want, you can hire a guide. But the guide is only responsible for leading the way. They can't be your protection like a tour guide. I'm just looking around. Qin Chuan asked, will I be attacked in the black market? As long as you act fast enough and the battle is resolved quickly enough, there won't be a problem. Knight Serenity replied, if the guards of the black market catch someone fighting, both sides will be punished no matter who is right or wrong. The severity of the punishment depends on the situation. Qin Chuan heard this and said, in other words, if I attack in the black market, I have to do the same as when I dealt with the inferior demon. I don't give the other party a chance to react, right? Knight Serenity nodded and replied, that's right. While they were talking, Qin Chuan and Knight Serenity had already entered the black market. They didn't hire a guide, as they wanted to see if there were any blind people targeting them. The black market was very lively, and people were coming and going. It didn't look any different from a normal black market. If there had to be a difference, it was probably that the people here used cloaks to cover their faces. They didn't want to show their faces in public. Moreover, the weakest person here was at least at the early stage of the Dongxi realm. There were no demigod realm cultivators. When in Rome, Qin Chuan and Knight Serenity did as the Romans did. They also used cloaks to cover their faces and figures. They didn't stand out in the crowd. They walked around aimlessly and looked at the surrounding shops. When they saw a shop selling divine tools, Qin Chuan was surprised and asked, there's actually a shop selling divine tools here? Sacred artifacts were treasures that could greatly enhance the combat prowess of cultivators at the Dongxu and body integration stage. They were extremely rare. Even low-grade sacred artifacts were extremely precious. Normally, they would appear in auctions. This was the first time Qin Chuan had seen one being put up for sale. Knight Serenity explained to Qin Chuan, this is the black market. Most of the things here are stolen goods. This shop selling divine tools isn't a shop of one person. It's a shop of a group of space pirates. This group of space pirates is called Pegasus. It's the largest group of space pirates in the Celestial Cluster. Their 10 leaders are all at the peak of the Dongxi realm. Hearing Knight Serenity's explanation, Qin Chuan couldn't help but show a touch of surprise. He said, how many people did they rob to open a shop that specializes in selling divine tools? Knight Serenity shook his head and explained, actually, it's not like that. Some people have the money to buy divine tools, but they may not be alive to take them out of the black market. That's why a divine tool can sometimes be sold dozens of times in the shop and still be there. Chapter 1065. After hearing Knight Serenity's explanation, Qin Chuan was slightly taken aback. He said, in other words, Pegasus will look for an opportunity to attack the people who buy the saint weapons in the black market and then take them back? Aren't they afraid that they won't be able to do business in the future? Knight Serenity glanced at the shop in front of him and said to Qin Chuan, what if the price of their saint weapons is only 1/10 of the normal price? Qin Chuan laughed and said, "As expected, greed is the most harmful. In the face of the threat of death, no one would be willing to buy a saint weapon at a normal price. However, if the price of the saint weapon was unbelievably low, there would always be some confident people who would take the risk out of desperation. After all, if they succeeded in taking the saint weapon out of the black market, they would be rewarded handsomely." However, Qin Chuan could tell from Knight Serenity's description that very few people would succeed. As they were talking, Qin Chuan had already walked into the shop named Saint Weapon Direct Sale Shop. He wanted to see the quality of the saint weapons inside. When Qin Chuan walked into the shop, an enthusiastic attendant immediately came up to greet him. He smiled and said to Qin Chuan, "Sir, what kind of saint weapon are you looking for? Attack type or defense type? Or support type?" Qin Chuan directly asked, "Do you have high-grade saint weapons? Supreme-grade saint weapons are fine too." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, the attendant's smile immediately stiffened. He glanced at Qin Chuan and said, "Sir, the highest grade saint weapons we sell in our shop is only mid-grade. High-grade saint weapons, or even top-grade saint weapons, were treasures that even universe overlords might not necessarily possess, let alone a shop in the black market like this. Even the masters of the celestial cluster might not have more than 2 top-grade saint weapons among the Tian people." In the attendant's opinion, Qin Chuan was purely making fun of him by asking this question. "Then take out all the mid-grade saint weapons you have here for me to see." Qin Chuan smiled and said, "If there are any suitable ones, I will naturally pay for them." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, the attendant did not say anything. He quickly placed 7 mid-grade saint weapons in front of Qin Chuan. He was not afraid that Qin Chuan would attack them directly. Even experts at the consummate Dongshu realm would not be able to break through their anti-theft system in a short period of time. In the eyes of the attendant's eyes, Qin Chuan, who was only at the early stage of the Dongshu realm, was just a fat lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Of the 7 mid-grade saint weapons, 1 was offensive, 2 were defensive, and the other 4 were auxiliary. The attack-type medium-grade saint artifact was called Sky Moonblade. It was a short blade with the shape of a crescent moon, and it was priced at 1,500,000 star stones. This price was really cheap, to the point that it could not be any cheaper for a medium-grade attack-type saint artifact. Qin Chuan had the Milky Way sword, so he did not need the Sky Moonblade. He turned to look at Knight Serenity and asked, "How many star stones did you bring?" Knight Serenity replied indifferently, 30 million star stones. The attendant's eyes immediately lit up when he heard Knight Serenity's reply. He looked at Qin Chuan with even more enthusiasm. 30 million star stones. This was a big fat lamb. Qin Chuan pointed at the Sky Moonblade and asked, "Do you need it?" Knight Serenity shook her head and said, "My claws are the best weapon. However, this blade can be sold for at least 10 million star stones in an auction. I can buy it." If it was in the past, Knight Serenity might not even be interested in looking inside when she passed by. But now, she really wanted to empty this place. If the people of the Pegasus clan wanted to find trouble with her, then they could come. Qin Chuan smiled. He turned to the attendant and asked, 30 million star stones. Can I buy all the saint weapons in your shop?" The attendant's expression suddenly became serious when he heard Qin Chuan's words. He looked at Qin Chuan with a subtle gaze and asked, "Mister, are you serious?" "Of course." Qin Chuan nodded. "I want to book the whole place today." Yu very straightforwardly swiped his card, using 28 million first-grade star stones to purchase the 32 saint artifacts in the entire store. If these saint artifacts were sent to the 30th District's auction house, they could be sold for at least 200 million first-grade star stones. The Pegasus clan wouldn't let Qin Chuan and Knight Serenity take away these saint weapons so easily. So when Qin Chuan and Knight Serenity left the shop, they were already being watched by the people of the Pegasus clan. Just when the people of the Pegasus clan thought that Qin Chuan and Knight Serenity would leave the black market in a hurry, Qin Chuan and Knight Serenity strangely walked deeper into the black market. "I thought you would refuse my somewhat absurd suggestion." Qin Chuan smiled at Knight Serenity and said, "We are being watched closely right now." Knight Serenity faintly said to Qin Chuan, I am a space pirate. I don't deserve to be a space pirate if I don't do a profitable business. The Pegasus clan once wanted to recruit me, but I refused. Because of this, they chased after me for 3 whole years. They only stopped when I advanced to the peak of the profound emptiness realm. I have always kept this grudge in my heart. So there is such a grudge between you and the Pegasus clan. Qin Xuan glanced at the surroundings and said to Knight Serenity, "Let's go. We will go buy a pass to the 30th district. In a black market, as long as you have money, you could buy anything you want." The price of the 30th district pass was clearly 300,000 star stones. Qin Xuan and Knight Serenity were now rich and overbearing. They bought 2 passes without hesitation. When they came out of the shop, they finally encountered the first wave of attack from the Pegasus clan. Their movements were very fast and very stealthy. However, before they could make a move, a pitch-black cave swallowed them up. They disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. They didn't even alarm the passers-by. The one who attacked was Qin Xuan, not Knight Serenity. Knight Serenity looked at Qin Xuan in astonishment and said, "What a profound law of space." Qin Xuan smiled and said to Knight Serenity, "Although I am only at the early stage of the profound emptiness realm, I am not weak in other aspects." Since he woke up, Qin Xuan discovered that his attainments in the law of space had already reached the limit of his current stage. Space collapse was something he could easily grasp. As for great destruction, he could also use it. However, the consumption was too great. He wouldn't use it unless he had no other choice. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that in terms of attainments in the law of space, no one could be stronger than Qin Xuan in the profound emptiness realm. Originally, Knight Serenity thought that Qin Xuan bought all the sacred tools because of her existence. But now, it seemed that even if Qin Xuan was alone, he might not be unable to take away the sacred tools. She still underestimated Qin Xuan. When Qin Xuan and Knight Serenity walked into another shop that sold rare treasures and conveniently dealt with the third wave of enemies, the Pegasus clan finally realized that something was wrong. He reported this matter and asked for backup. The 7 leaders of the Pegasus clan who were in charge of the black market heard the news and came over. Chapter 1066. The 7th leader of the Pegasus was named Ersi, and he was from the Tashan race. His personality was as steady as his huge body, which was why he was in charge of the black market. When Ersi heard from the attendant that someone had bought all the saint weapons, the first thing he did was to check if any universe overlords had come to the 99th district recently. Based on the results he obtained, no universe overlords had come to the 99th district, and Chaos Overlord hadn't left his palace either. This made Ersi heave a sigh of relief. At the same time, he was secretly mocking himself. How could there be universe overlords who would stoop so low as to covet their worthless saint weapons? He was really overthinking. However, after half an hour, they had lost dozens of great beings, and Ersi couldn't sit still any longer. What do those 2 look like? Ersi looked at the attendant of the holy weapon shop, and his eyes were burning with anger. Those who had the power to kill the great beings he had sent out had to be great beings at the Dongshu level. He wanted to see who was so arrogant as to attack the Pegasus. If it was someone as powerful as the Tian people, then he could only admit that he was unlucky. If it wasn't, then he would make that person suffer a fate worse than death. Facing Ersi's question, the attendant was frightened. They covered their faces with cloaks, so I don't know what they look like. However, I can confirm that they are a man and a woman. The man's force is at the early stage of the Dongshu level, while the woman's force is unfathomable. Seems like it was that woman who killed our people. Ersi sneered. Where are they now? They are now at Old Tut's armor shop, the attendant replied. The attendant replied, Our men are already keeping an eye on them. As soon as they go out, we will immediately launch an attack. There's no need to make meaningless sacrifices, Ersi said in a low voice. Leave this to me. As he spoke, Ersi disappeared from the attendant's sight. The attendant, who had been under great pressure, couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. As long as Ersi was willing to help, then he would definitely be able to get the holy weapons back. If those two really took the holy weapons away, then he would be dead. Ever since Qin Chuan had obtained the holy monarch armor, he no longer needed battle armor. The only reason he had come to the shop to look at battle armor was to compare it with the holy monarch armor. He wanted to see just how strong the holy monarch armor was. The holy monarch armor didn't disappoint Qin Chuan either. None of the armor in the store could compare to the holy monarch armor. Not even the most prized treasure of the store could compare. Sir, this angel is the treasure of our shop. It's equipped with 2 sky patrol cannons, 1 psionic sniper rifle, 2 light guns, and its close combat weapon is the 9 giant blades, which can compete with a holy weapon. The angel's strongest point is not its attack, but its defense. Even universe overlords can't destroy the angel with 1 punch. Old Toot looked at Qin Chuan and said enthusiastically, "This angel is only priced at 45 million star stones. If you don't have enough cash, you can exchange it with a saint artifact." Hearing Old Toot's words, Qin Chuan raised his eyebrows slightly and asked, "You're quite well informed." Old Toot laughed and said to Qin Chuan, "Information is the most important thing in the black market. If you need someone to help you transport the saint artifact, we'll be more than happy to serve you. You only need to pay a very low commission." Qin Chuan grinned and looked at Old Toot playfully. He said, "Then after I die, you can take this batch of saint artifacts for yourself, or you can bargain with the Pegasus and reap some benefits from it. Is that right?" As he spoke, Qin Chuan patted Old Toot's shoulder and said, "As expected of a merchant from the black market, you're indeed black-hearted. However, we don't need your help." With that, Qin Chuan turned around and prepared to leave. However, when he saw a figure standing at the entrance like an iron tower, he could not help but squint his eyes and study the person. Knight Serenity recognized the person immediately. She said to Qin Chuan, "He's called Ersi. He's the 7th leader of the Pegasus. He's from the Tashin clan and is extremely strong." When he heard Knight Serenity's words, Qin Chuan smiled widely. He said, "I've not wasted my time wandering around here. There's finally a big fish." Knight Serenity originally thought that Qin Chuan had been wandering around the black market because he was fearless and did not care about the Pegasus attacks. However, when she heard Qin Chuan's words, she realized that Qin Chuan had been wandering around the black market on purpose. His goal was to lure the leader of the Pegasus over. However, what was his goal? "Friend, can we have a chat?" Ersi looked at Qin Chuan. He did not recklessly approach Qin Chuan because of his strength. He kept a safe distance from Qin Chuan. When Qin Chuan heard Ersi's question, he didn't answer Ersi immediately. Instead, he asked Yu via voice transmission, "How does his strength compare to yours?" "I'm talking about the previous you." Knight Serenity thought for a moment and replied, "I'm a little stronger than him. He's not my opponent." Although they were both at the exceptional Void Realm in the past, Knight Serenity was stronger than Ersi in terms of overall strength. If they really fought, Knight Serenity was confident that he could kill Ersi. However, that would take a lot of time and attract the guards of the black market. After getting Knight Serenity's answer, Qin Chuan smiled and said to Knight Serenity, "Take off your hood and let him see your true face." Knight Serenity did not know what Qin Chuan wanted to do, but she still did as she was told. When Knight Serenity took off her hood and revealed her true face to Ersi, Ersi immediately snorted and said, "I was wondering who had the guts to provoke our Pegasus and not give us any face. So it's you, Knight Serenity." Qin Chuan took a step back and let Knight Serenity face Ersi. Then he transmitted his voice to Knight Serenity. "Tell him that you bought the sacred artifact. Our necromancer is preparing to merge with the Pegasus. Arrange a time and place to meet him. Be there or be square." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Knight Serenity's heart was slightly moved. She said to Qin Chuan, "I did buy the sacred artifact. Since you dared to put it up for sale, I naturally dare to buy it. Do you want to fight with me? At that time, we will all be punished if we provoke the guards. However, I can pay enough fines to avoid the punishment." Say it. What do you want? Of course, Ursi would not fight with Knight Serenity. Once he fought with Knight Serenity, if he could not end the fight in a short time, it would be equivalent to helping Knight Serenity leave the black market safely with the help of the guards. At that time, Knight Serenity would use the sacred artifact to avoid the punishment. The one who would suffer a great loss would be the Pegasus. He would not do such a stupid thing. Chapter 1067. Facing Ursi's question, Knight Serenity said indifferently, I haven't seen the 10 leaders of Pegasus for a long time. I want to arrange a time to meet with you. Hearing Knight Serenity's words, Ursi took a deep look at Knight Serenity and asked, You're not afraid of death? Although Ursi wasn't a match for Knight Serenity, if the 10 leaders of Pegasus were all present, Knight Serenity definitely wouldn't be a match for them. Now that Knight Serenity actually took the initiative to meet with them, Ursi felt very strange. Normal people would never have this kind of idea unless they didn't want to live anymore. As for Knight Serenity advancing to the body fusion stage, Ursi didn't even think about it. Although the peak of the profound emptiness realm was known as the half-step body fusion stage and was the closest to the body fusion stage, some people might not be able to cross this half-step in their lifetime. As far as he knew, Knight Serenity had only reached the peak of the profound emptiness realm for 300 years. Unless he had a great opportunity, it was impossible for him to advance to the body fusion stage so quickly. Actually, I've been thinking about a problem all these years. If I was willing to join you back then and become one of you, perhaps I would have a better life than now. Knight Serenity looked at Ursi and said, Now most of the routes are occupied by your Pegasus. I haven't caught a big fish for a long time, so I want to rejoin your Pegasus and become the 11th leader. I want to share those routes with you. Hearing Knight Serenity's words, Ursi couldn't help but stare blankly for a moment. He never thought that Knight Serenity would actually say such a thing. But after thinking about it carefully, what Knight Serenity said made sense. After all, they were all space pirates. Who didn't want to make a fortune? In the past, there were other space pirates who wanted to join the Pegasus with the same purpose as Knight Serenity, but they were all swallowed up by them. You want to join our Pegasus? Ursi looked at Knight Serenity with a subtle gaze and said, Then return the sacred artifact first and let me see your sincerity. No matter what Knight Serenity's intentions were, Yules felt that it was better to get the sacred artifact back first before anything else. 10 days later, I will be waiting for you on Skull Star. If you come, I will return the saint items to you as a sign of my sincerity. If you don't come, these saint items will belong to me. Knight Serenity faintly said, I'm leaving now. If you want to stop me, then make your move. With that, Knight Serenity walked outside. She didn't deliberately guard against Ursi, and Ursi didn't make a move against Knight Serenity because he wasn't confident. As for Qinchuan, he had already regarded Qinchuan as Knight Serenity's follower. He didn't even bother to look at Qinchuan. After leaving the black market without any obstructions, Knight Serenity stared deeply at Qinchuan and asked, You want to meet the Pegasus because you want to recruit them? Qinchuan nodded and smiled. That's right. I want to find some underlings for you. What do you think? Knight Serenity was curious and asked, You want to form your own organization? Qinchuan nodded again and lamented. In the past, I had many brothers and sisters who could go through fire and water with me. Whenever I faced an enemy, they would always fight side by side with me. Later on, I left that place and came here. I can't find that feeling anymore. Now, I want to relive that feeling. In the past, Qinchuan didn't think that there was anything wrong with being a Lone Ranger. But after the battle with Arson, Qinchuan deeply realized that being a lone ranger wasn't a good thing. At least, it wasn't good when facing a powerful enemy. Qinchuan once thought that if it was Hai Wudi or Tu Shanhan who faced Arson who turned into a blood spirit, the others wouldn't have retreated so decisively. Instead, they would have supported Hai Wudi and Tu Shanhan, just like how the Sea Devil was willing to die to protect Hai Junlan. He once thought that if Lu Zi, Lin, or Chun Changxing were by his side, they would have courageously charged forward even if they knew that they would die. They would never have left him alone. In fact, only 2 Shan Yuan 8 were willing to sacrifice themselves to save him at that time. So this time, when he woke up, the first thing he did was to find a way to reach an agreement with Night Serenity and strengthen his wings. He didn't want to fight alone anymore. He needed the support and help of some brothers. It didn't matter even if these brothers didn't gather around him because of friendship. After hearing Qin Chuan's explanation, Night Serenity thought for a moment and then replied, "Pegasus is indeed a good choice." Not just Pegasus. Qin Chuan grinned. "I've never been a space pirate in my life. I'm going to use your and Pegasus' strength to unite all the space pirates and establish a kingdom of space pirates." Hearing that, Night Serenity took a deep look at Qin Chuan and said, "I only have a 10-year contract with you." Qin Chuan smiled and said to Night Serenity, "I once said that my growth will be faster than you think." After Qin Chuan and Night Serenity left the black market, Qin Chuan initiated a video conference among the leaders of Pegasus and told them what happened in the black market today. "This EU is really tired of living. We haven't gone to find trouble with her all these years. Instead, she has come to us herself." "Go in," the leader of the 9 leaders snorted. "I don't believe that she wants to join us. She must have teamed up with other forces to deal with us. We were too careless. We thought that no expert in the peak of the insightful emptiness realm would want to mess with us for no reason. We overlooked Night Serenity, our old rival." Ma Kachin frowned slightly and said, "We can't give up those holy weapons. We still have to go to Planet Skull. With the strength of US 10 brothers, unless a universe overlord comes in person, no one will be our match." Tainan, the leader of the 5 leaders, said while chewing on a piece of iron, "We'll send someone to check the situation in advance. We still have to be on our guard." As Tainan finished speaking, everyone looked at Chubby, the big leader, and waited for Chubby's decision. Facing everyone's gazes, Chubby said in a low voice, "Gather all our men and go to Planet Skull. If Night Serenity really wants to join us, then we'll welcome her. If she wants to harm us, then we'll kill her." As Chubby finished speaking, the conference came to an end. All the leaders started to mobilize their subordinates and prepare to go to Planet Skull. From the beginning to the end, no one thought about whether Night Serenity had reached the form synthesis stage. In everyone's eyes, if one of the space pirates had to reach the form synthesis stage, it had to be Pegasus. As for Night Serenity, they had to wait for a while. Chapter 1068. Planet Skull was a desolate planet at the edge of the celestial cluster. It was a famous garbage dump. Few people would come here under normal circumstances. But today was different. The infamous Pegasus pirate gang in the celestial cluster had come to Planet Skull. They had brought more than 100 spaceships with them. More than half of them were war-level spaceships, and 3 of them were fortress-level spaceships. Such a force was enough to wipe out any force without the support of a universe overlord. Qin Chuan stood in front of the porthole and looked at the spaceships that were densely packed above Planet Skull. He couldn't help but put on a playful expression and asked, "Will we die if they attack us with all their might right now?" "They won't. The defense system of Dead Souls is a level 6 defense rune array carved by a level 6 rune array master that I hired. It won't be broken so easily," Night Serenity said to Qin Chuan. "Besides, I won't give them a chance to attack us." "That's good to hear." Qin Chuan smiled and said to Night Serenity, "Let's go and meet them." When Qin Chuan and Night Serenity left Dead Souls and flew forward, 10 people from the Pegasus pirate gang also left their spaceships and flew toward them. They were the 10 leaders of the Pegasus pirate gang. They came from different races, and all of them were great beings in the peak of the Dongxi realm. Yules looked at Night Serenity with a subtle expression and said in a low voice, "You really dared to come." Night Serenity glanced at Yules and said casually, "Why wouldn't I dare to come? All right, let's cut the crap." Iron Man looked at Yu and chuckled. "I've always been curious about what kind of face you're hiding under that mask. You must satisfy my curiosity when you join us." Chubby stepped forward and asked Night Serenity, "Are you really willing to join the Pegasus pirate gang?" Night Serenity shook his head and replied, You're wrong. I'm not joining the Pegasus Pirate Gang. The Pegasus Pirate Gang is going to be my subordinate and join the Dead Souls Pirate Gang. As Knight Serenity's voice fell, the 10 leaders of the Pegasus Pirate Gang fell silent. However, they soon burst into laughter. They laughed so hard that tears flowed out of their eyes. This was definitely the funniest joke they had heard this year. Do you think you're a universe overlord at the combination stage? Kachin laughed and mocked Knight Serenity. Aren't you afraid of being laughed at when you say such big words? I think her brain must be damaged. Gowan sneered. What are we waiting for? Kill her. Everyone looked at Shiobai. As long as Shiobai gave the order, they would immediately pounce on the arrogant Yiyu like a pack of wolves. They would tear the arrogant Yiyu into pieces, then take back the sacred artifact that belonged to them and annex the necromancer. Faced with everyone's gazes, Chubby didn't give the order to attack. He looked at Knight Serenity and said in an extremely low voice, "Which step did you take?" When everyone heard Chubby's words, the smiles on their faces gradually disappeared. Solemn or astonished expressions occupied their faces. They slowly looked at Knight Serenity with disbelief in their eyes. Knight Serenity took that step? How was that possible? Yi replied to Chiobai with a high-pitched dragon roar. She turned into a black-purple dragon that was hundreds of meters long. She spread her wings and almost covered the entire Pegasus Pirate Gang. The terrifying pressure made everyone tremble in fear. They could not help but reveal frightened expressions on their faces. Everyone clearly knew that this was the pressure that only an overlord of the universe could possess. It represented the supreme power. Submit or die. Knight Serenity looked at Chubby and the others with sharp eyes. If they dared to resist, she would let them have a taste of her dragon breath. Facing Yi Yu's extremely oppressive gaze, Chiobai's entire body trembled, and the expression on his face became incomparably ferocious. He had always thought that he was the only one among the Star Pirates who was close to the body integration stage, but reality had given him a ruthless slap in the face. Facing Yu, who had transformed into a giant dragon, he couldn't even muster up any will to resist. In the end, Chubby's ferocious expression turned into disappointment and pain. He knelt in front of Knight Serenity and chose the latter between death and submission. When Chubby knelt, the others who were still struggling gave up and knelt on the ground, choosing to submit. Qingchuan was surprised to see the reaction of Chubby and the others. He asked, "Are you not going to try to resist?" Hearing Qingchuan's words, Chubby looked deeply at Qingchuan and said, "Resisting an overlord won't do us any good." "Well, you made the right choice." Qingchuan smiled and said to everyone, "Divide your spiritual power. Now, I want to sign a master-servant contract with you." Everyone was surprised to hear Qingchuan's words. Shouldn't they submit to Knight Serenity, who had become an overlord of the universe? Why was it this young man who was only at the early stage of the Dongxi realm? Faced with everyone's puzzled gazes, Knight Serenity said indifferently, "Not only will he be your master, but he will also be my master." Knight Serenity's answer made everyone widen their eyes in shock. They could not believe that a powerful overlord of the universe would become the servant of an ant. Even the Tian people, the rulers of the celestial cluster, could not do this. After the shock, although they could not calm down, they still respectfully divided their spiritual power according to Qingchuan's will and signed a master-servant contract with Qingchuan. Unlike Knight Serenity, the master-servant contract between Qingchuan and Chubby and the others had stricter requirements, but the duration was also 10 years. "Now, you are my servants, but only for 10 years. After 10 years, you can freely choose to remain loyal to me or leave." Qingchuan smiled and said to everyone, "If you have any questions, you can ask now." Hearing Qingchuan's words, Chubby took a deep breath and asked, "Who are you?" Until now, Chubby still did not know Qingchuan's name or which race he was from. Their loyalty was only due to the threat of death. "My name is Qingchuan, and I come from a great but bitter place." Qingchuan smiled and said to everyone, "If there is a chance in the future, I will take you to see that place. At this time, Knight Serenity had returned to Chinchuan's side in human form. She looked at Chubby and the others, who were still kneeling on the ground, with a complicated expression. If she had not met Chinchuan, she would not have had the courage to stand in front of Chubby and the others. Fate really made fools of people. Get up. Chinchuan looked at everyone. Now, I want to announce something. From today onwards, the Pegasus Pirate Gang and the Dead Souls Pirate Gang will no longer exist in the Celestial Cluster. We will establish a new pirate kingdom called Exile. Chapter 1069. Chinchuan had decided on the name of the Banished Star Pirate Empire after careful consideration. He had to remember his mission at all times. He had to remember those who were still in the Banished Lands. One day, he would definitely rescue everyone from the Banished Lands and lead them back to the embrace of the universe. He would rebuild the glory of the ancient times. I feel like I've become the savior of the world once again. Chinchuan grinned. Actually, I don't like this feeling. It feels like I'm high and mighty, and everyone has to accept my kindness and owe me a favor. In the study, Chinchuan mumbled to himself. If not for the potential threat of Zerg and the Void Empire, he would really like to return to the Banished Lands and see his friends and teachers. Then, he would lead everyone to this new world and start a new life. If anyone was unwilling to leave, he would not force them. Everyone had the right to make their own choices. I'm still too weak. Chinchuan sighed. I'm only relying on Knight Serenity's deterrence to gather these rebellious space pirates together. Right now, I'm still not strong enough to convince everyone. Chinchuan had a lot of things to do at this time. Other than cultivation, he had to figure out why he had come to the Celestial Cluster, why he had interacted with the Ying clan, where Lu Zi and the others were now, and why he had lost contact with everyone in Tron Nebula. The road had to be taken one step at a time, so Chinchuan decided to cultivate hard and increase his strength first. On the third day of Chinchuan's cultivation, Knight Serenity came. She said to Chinchuan, I've sent people to investigate. The Ying clan is investigating the matter of the Voyager. They seem to be very concerned about this matter and have caused quite a stir. Hearing Knight Serenity's words, Chinchuan frowned slightly. Did you find out if the Argent King of the Ying clan descended on Tron Nebula? The matter is still under investigation. There are no results for now. Knight Serenity replied. However, I can tell that the Ying clan cares a lot about you. As for why they care so much about you, we are still investigating. The Ying clan was a powerful race that dominated the entire Stansos region. Unless it was someone as powerful as the Tian people, it would be very difficult for other forces to investigate the Ying clan. Although Knight Serenity and the others had a very wide intelligence network, it was almost impossible for them to infiltrate the Ying clan in a short period of time. After all, they were just space pirates. In fact, Chinchuan only needed to show himself to the Ying clan if he wanted to find out the truth. However, he couldn't do that because he didn't know whether the Ying clan was friend or foe. He had too many secrets on him. If the Ying clan cared about him because of these secrets, then he would be courting death if he showed himself. Even with Knight Serenity's protection, he might not be able to escape unscathed. What a headache. Chinchuan felt somewhat helpless. Who is the person investigating the Voyager? Do we have a chance to get close to him? His name is Duoluan. He is the young master of the Ying clan, a descendant of the Argent King. Knight Serenity said to Chinchuan, Duoluan's guards are very powerful. Unless I act personally, it will be very difficult to get close to him. If we do that, we will definitely provoke the Argent King, which is very disadvantageous for us. They were both universe overlords. Although Yu had the bloodline of the first-generation Sky Dragon, she was not confident that she could defeat Silver King, who had been in the combined body stage for more than 1,000 years. We can't do that. Chinchuan thought for a moment and said to Knight Serenity, I need a reasonable chance to get close to the upper echelons of the Ying clan. It doesn't matter if it is a banquet or a ball. Help me find such a chance. I understand. Knight Serenity nodded. With Chubby's connections in Stansos, it shouldn't be difficult to find such a chance. Although Qin Xuan had unified the Dead Souls pirate gang and the Pegasus pirate gang and established a new pirate kingdom, he didn't spread news. Therefore, not many people in Stansos knew about this. In the eyes of outsiders, the Pegasus pirate gang and the Dead Souls pirate gang were still two different powers. Chubby didn't let Qin Xuan down. He found a very good chance for Qin Xuan to get close to the upper echelons of the Yin clan. The Purple Dream Saintess of the Dream Race was about to be engaged to the young master of the Yin clan, Duoluan. At that time, guests would be invited. Qin Xuan could go as the representative of the Pegasus pirate gang to congratulate them. Logically speaking, a shady organization like the Pegasus pirate gang wouldn't have the qualifications to appear in such an occasion. However, Duoluan had been investigating the Voyager and needed the Pegasus pirate gang's help. That was why the Pegasus pirate gang received the invitation. There were only 3 people who could attend this grand engagement party. They were Qin Xuan, Knight Serenity, and Chubby. Qin Xuan and Knight Serenity would follow Chubby as his followers. Qin Xuan could ask Chubby for the information he wanted. The engagement party was set in June of the Celestial Cluster, which was 1 month later. During this time, Qin Xuan sent people to investigate the Dream Race and the Purple Dream Saintess. However, they didn't get much information. The Dream Race occupies the 10th district of Stansos. They are one of the top 10 races in the Celestial Cluster. The Purple Dream Saintess is the leader of the younger generation of the Dream Race. It is said that she reached the late stage of Dongshu before the age of 50. Her talent is comparable to the Tian people's Son of Heaven. This Purple Dream Saintess was chosen as the Saintess 10 years ago. Very little information about her has been leaked. It is said that very few people from the Dream Race have been able to get in touch with her. Some people even think that this Purple Dream Saintess is a character made up by the Dream Race. This engagement banquet will be the first time this Purple Dream Saintess has appeared in public. Qin Xuan looked at the information in his hand and asked curiously, "Why would the Dream Race marry the Yin clan?" "We don't know about this," Knight Serenity said to Qin Xuan. Although Duoluan is a rare genius and has reached the peak of Dongshu, he is already 150 years old. He is much weaker than the Purple Dream Saintess. Logically speaking, he doesn't have the qualifications. Check it out. Don't make any mistakes in this information. Qin Xuan pursed his lips and said, "Remember, don't expose yourself. Don't let them know that we have anything to do with the Voyager." "I know." Knight Serenity nodded and turned to leave. She would tell Chubby and the others to investigate this matter. After Knight Serenity left, Qin Xuan looked at the information about the Purple Dream Saintess in his hand and couldn't help but fall into deep thought. He didn't know why, but there was a faint ominous feeling in his heart. He felt that something bad was going to happen. Chapter 1070. For cultivator who had already stepped into the Dongshu stage, blindly cultivating in seclusion would not improve their strength and realm. Dongshu stage cultivators needed to rely on their comprehension and the power of laws to improve their strength and realm. Therefore, during this 1 month, Qin Xuan did not spend all his time cultivating in seclusion. Instead, he was studying where he could come into contact with Dao runes. For Qin Xuan, the best and fastest way to improve his strength was to come into contact with Dao runes and let the rune sword absorb the power of the Dao runes. This would help him master Dao runes and obtain new rune arrays. He was already a level 6 rune array master. If he could obtain a level 7 rune array with thunder, wood, or wind attributes, he might be able to become a level 7 rune array master. However, level 7 rune arrays were rarer than upper-grade holy weapons. It was too difficult to find a level 7 rune array master that was just right for him. "Big brother, if I master a Dao rune with thunder attributes, will it greatly improve my strength?" Qin Xuan was very curious about this. After all, his talent rune was thunder attribute, and the power of law he mastered was also the thunder law. If he could master a Dao rune with thunder attributes, his strength should be able to improve qualitatively. The rune sword responded to Qin Xuan's question. If Dao runes with other attributes could increase Qinchuan's strength by 1, then the Dao rune with thunder attributes could increase Qinchuan's strength by 10. Even if it was only a level 6 battle array, it could unleash a power that was infinitely close to a level 7 battle array. It was enough for Qinchuan to face a universe overlord. Of course, this was only theoretically possible. After all, Qinchuan hadn't mastered a Dao rune with thunder attributes, and universe overlords might not give Qinchuan a chance to engrave a battle array. When Qinchuan asked Knight Serenity about Dao runes, Knight Serenity told Qinchuan straightforwardly that all the Dao runes in the celestial cluster were controlled by one power, the Tian people. Anyone who wanted to comprehend Dao runes had to go through the Tian people. Apart from the Tian people, no one else knows where the Dao runes are. Qinchuan was a little confused. No matter how powerful the Tian people are, they can't take all the Dao runes for themselves, right? Don't the other powers have any ideas? Knight Serenity gave Qinchuan a strange look and said, "The location of the Dao runes isn't a secret, and comprehending Dao runes requires a lot of time. Apart from Talisman Matrix Masters, no one else has much interest in Dao runes. No Talisman Matrix Master would attack the guards of the Tian people just to comprehend Dao runes for a few days. It's no different from courting death." After hearing Knight Serenity's explanation, Qinchuan was slightly stunned, and then a look of realization appeared on his face. There was only one rune sword in the world, and only he could use the power of the rune sword to absorb the power of the Dao runes in a short time and comprehend Dao runes. Other people would need at least a few years to comprehend Dao runes, and a few years was enough for the Tian people to find them and kill them tens of thousands of times. Moreover, only Talisman Matrix Masters were truly interested in Dao runes, and they had to be Talisman Matrix Masters above level 5. With the huge population of the Celestial Cluster, there weren't many Talisman Matrix Masters above level 5. Moreover, not all of these Talisman Matrix Masters had the talent to comprehend Dao runes. Coupled with the difficulty of obtaining matching battle formations, it was normal that Dao runes weren't valued. If Talisman Matrix Masters want to comprehend Dao runes, do they have to join the Tian people? Qinchuan looked at Knight Serenity curiously. If it wasn't necessary, he didn't want to provoke the Tian people. That's not the case. As long as you pay the price according to the requirements of the Tian people, you can obtain the opportunity to comprehend Dao runes. Knight Serenity said to Qinchuan, "The price is battle formations. As long as Talisman Matrix Masters can provide the Tian people with a battle formation above level 5, they can obtain the opportunity to comprehend Dao runes. They can only choose one of the many Dao runes, and the time limit is only 10 years. Hearing Knight Serenity's words, Qinchuan's heart slightly moved, and he said, "So the Tian people should have a lot of battle formations, and there should be a lot of Talisman Matrix Masters among the Tian people." Knight Serenity nodded and replied, "The strongest level 7 Talisman Matrix Master in the Celestial Cluster is from the Tian people. There are thousands of level 6 Talisman Matrix Masters among the Tian people, and level 5 Talisman Matrix Masters are innumerable. However, the Tian people have very strict requirements for battle formations. They only want battle formations that haven't been collected." Qinchuan was slightly surprised and said, "This requirement is a bit too much. I'm afraid they have already collected all the battle formations above level 5 in the Celestial Cluster." That's more or less the case. Therefore, except for the Tian people's Talisman Matrix Masters, who often go everywhere to comprehend Dao runes, the Talisman Matrix Masters outside rarely have the opportunity to comprehend Dao runes. Over time, the Talisman Matrix Masters outside have gradually given up on comprehending Dao runes. The Talisman Matrix Masters who want to continue to comprehend Dao runes can only join the Tian people and work for the Tian people in exchange for the opportunity to comprehend Dao runes. Knight Serenity looked at Qinchuan with a subtle gaze and said, "If you want to comprehend Dao runes, you can only do it through the Tian people." Qinchuan frowned and said, The Tion people are using their power in the celestial cluster to monopolize the battle formations. In the long run, the powerful talisman matrix masters in the celestial cluster will all become members of the Tion people. Not only that, the Tion people's monopoly is also targeting Fortress-class spaceships. Knight Serenity said again, Fortress-class spaceships need to be equipped with defensive talisman matrices above level 6. In the celestial cluster, only the Tion people can meet this requirement. Qinchuan thought for a moment and asked, if we attack a place where Dao runes are located, how long will it take for the Tion people to respond and send reinforcements? What are the chances of us being exposed? Upon hearing Qinchuan's question, Knight Serenity felt that Qinchuan didn't take her previous words to heart, so she advised, the gains don't make up for the losses. From now on, we have to be careful. If the Tion people get hold of our weakness, it will be a disaster. Even though Knight Serenity had become an overlord in the universe and was on an equal footing with many forces, the Tion people were not among them. The Tion people were unique in the celestial cluster. Knight Serenity would never provoke the Tion people unless she had no other choice. I'm just assuming. Qinchuan smiled and said to Knight Serenity, I won't joke about my life. Knight Serenity took a deep look at Qinchuan and replied, as long as we handle it well, the Tion people won't know our identity at that time. According to the distance, the Tion people's reinforcements should arrive in 1 to 3 days. After that, the probability of our identity being exposed should be more than 70%. It's almost impossible to provoke the Tion people in the celestial cluster without being discovered. Even the Dao runes, which are targeted at the Tion people, are no exception. Chapter 1071. A month passed quickly. Qinchuan, Knight Serenity, and Chubby received invitations from the Ying clan and went to the 49th zone to attend the engagement party between Purple Dream Saintus and Duoluan. When they arrived at the 49th zone on a spaceship without any obvious pirate markings, Qinchuan and Knight Serenity were acting normal, but Chubby was a little nervous. As someone who had been on the battlefield for a long time, Chubby shouldn't be so nervous. However, when he learned that Knight Serenity had robbed a batch of the Ying clan's wealth and that the person Duoluan asked him to investigate was Knight Serenity, his heart couldn't calm down. After all, they were in the Ying clan's headquarters. If they were found to be the culprit, it would be very difficult for them to escape unscathed, even if Knight Serenity was now a universe overlord. You seem to be getting more and more cowardly. Knight Serenity looked at Chubby. Don't act so unbearably. Hearing Knight Serenity's words, Chubby's expression couldn't help but become a little bitter. He didn't want to act so unbearably and be looked down upon by others. But what they were doing now was like coming to their doorstep to provoke them. It was too dangerous. Qinchuan laughed and said to Chubby, you must learn to treat everything with a normal heart. Even if the sky falls down, there are tall people to hold it up. Don't be afraid. After being comforted by Qinchuan, Chubby took a deep breath and tried to adjust his state of mind. Soon, the great leader of the Pegasus pirate gang returned. He slowly walked out of the cabin door and went to the reception of the port expressionlessly to verify his identity. After confirming Chubby's identity, the Ying clan's receptionist didn't let him in immediately. Instead, he installed 3 surveillance devices on Qinchuan, Knight Serenity, and Chubby. Then he said to them coldly, there will be many VIPs coming today. As pirates, you have no right to participate in such a grand event. I have installed surveillance devices on you, so your every move will be under our surveillance. I hope you won't do anything unpleasant. After hearing the receptionist's words, Qinchuan, Knight Serenity, and Knight Serenity's expressions turned ugly. No one liked to be monitored. Although they were pirates, they still had their dignity. Just as Chubby was about to argue with the receptionist, Qinchuan sent a voice transmission to Chubby, telling him not to cause trouble. Chubby suppressed the anger in his heart and snorted coldly. Then he walked towards the door. The receptionist sneered and showed a disdainful expression. Just a few pirates. If it weren't for the fact that the young master needs them, they wouldn't have the right to step into the port of our 49th district. If they dared to make a ruckus just now, I would have asked the guard to capture them and send them to exchange for the bounty. Hearing the receptionist's mocking words, Qin Xuan pursed his lips and sent a voice transmission to Chubby. Remember their faces. Just find a chance to take revenge in the future. Right now, we have more important things to do. I don't want to attract too much attention. The more low profile, the better. Chubby heard Qin Xuan's words and nodded lightly. He replied, I will restrain myself, master. Before this, Chubby felt that Qin Xuan and Knight Serenity's act of robbing the Yin clan was very dangerous. But now, he felt that they should rob the Yin clan a few more times so that this arrogant race would pay the price for their arrogance. As the Yin clan's headquarters, the 49th district had been completely transformed by the Yin clan to their liking. The main color of the 49th district was silver. Whether it was the streets or the buildings, everything was silver. Plus, the clothes of the Yin clan members were also silver. The Yin clan members could just casually find a place to stand, and it was as though they were invisible. It was hard to find them with just the naked eye. Why would they like this style of architecture? Qin Xuan frowned as he looked at the silver world in front of him. Such a monotonous color. It's not aesthetically pleasing at all. Every race has their own aesthetics and characteristics. Silver is the lucky color of the Yin clan. It's also the favorite color of the Yin clan. Knight Serenity said to Qin Xuan, it's not strange that the Yin clan would transform the 49th district into this. We find it hard to accept, but to the Yin clan, this is the most beautiful place in the entire celestial cluster. After hearing Knight Serenity's explanation, Qin Xuan still couldn't accept it. However, he understood the logic of when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Anyway, he didn't plan to stay in the Yin clan for long. There were a total of 1,000 guests invited by the Yin clan and the Dream clan today. There was a number on the invitation letter, and they had to sit according to the number. Qin Xuan looked at the number 1,000 invitation letter in Chubby's hand and raised his eyebrows. He asked, are space pirates so weak in the celestial cluster? You're a broken void realm expert. Why are you ranked last? Hearing Qin Xuan's words, Qiubai sighed and said to Qin Xuan, in the endless universe, we can run amok and dare to make a move on anyone. However, in a place like Stansos that pays attention to hierarchy and rules, we pirates have the least right to speak and the least status. Anyone who has some status in Stasos doesn't like to deal with space pirates. When Qin Xuan heard this, he asked curiously, then how did you become space pirates? Qiubai explained, when I was born, I was on a spaceship of a space pirate. My parents were space pirates. Everyone I came into contact with was a space pirate. Naturally, I became a space pirate. After hearing Chubby's words, Qin Xuan looked at Knight Serenity. Knight Serenity said, I was born in the 99th district. It's the birthplace of space pirates. It's also the cradle of space pirates. I'm about the same as you. Qin Xuan chuckled. When I woke up, the people I met were also space pirates. However, I don't think there's anything wrong with being a space pirate. Everyone relies on their abilities to make a living. The law of the jungle is an eternal principle in the universe. Whether it was the Yin clan or the Tian people, Qin Xuan felt that they were no different from space pirates. The Tian people's way of doing things couldn't be any better than space pirates. As they spoke, the three found their seats. It was a round table in the most remote corner of the banquet hall. Fortunately, there were 3 chairs around a round table. They could all sit around the table. At this time, most of the guests were chatting with their friends in the Yin clan. Some were strolling around and enjoying the scenery of the Yin clan. Very few people were like Qin Xuan and the others. They were already sitting in the banquet hall, waiting for the banquet to start. Chapter 1072. When there was still some time before the banquet started, a person from the Yin clan came to Qin Xuan and spoke to Chubby. Chubby, the young lord wants to see you. Come with me. Hearing this, Qiubai immediately stood up and asked, do you want my 2 followers to stay here or bring them along? The person from the Yin clan glanced at Chubby before looking at Qin Xuan and Knight Serenity. He frowned when he saw the surveillance devices on them. Let's go together. I'm afraid that they might do something unsightly without restraint. Qin Chuan and Knight Serenity were already used to the Yin clan's attitude. They didn't take the person's words to heart. They followed behind Chubby and acted as his followers. Under the Yin clan's lead, they arrived at a garden beside the banquet hall. It was worth mentioning that the Yin clan's garden was filled with silver-white flowers. Even the roots weren't an exception. It was said that the celestial cluster didn't have such flowers. The Yin clan had to pay a huge price to cultivate this new species. Thinking of this, Qin Chuan couldn't help but sigh. The Yin clan was truly a race with a deformed aesthetic. Young lord, I brought the person you want to see. The Yin clan member slowly walked to the side of a handsome young man in a silver-white robe and bowed respectfully. Duoluan nodded. You may leave. Without my orders, no one is allowed to come close. Yes, I understand. After the Yin clan member left, only Duoluan and Qin Chuan were left in the garden. Duoluan ignored Qin Chuan and Knight Serenity. He looked at Chubby and asked, Is there any result on the matter I asked you to investigate? Facing Duoluan's question, Chubby coughed lightly and replied, Young lord, in the past period of time, there have been a total of 64 robberies in the area. There are a total of 142 pirate gangs in the vicinity. I'm currently investigating them one by one. I believe that there will be results soon. Hearing Chubby's reply, Duoluan frowned. I've already given you a month's time, Chubby said helplessly. Pirate gangs have always been free and undisciplined. Although our Pegasus pirate gang is powerful, it's almost impossible to find all the suspected pirate gangs in a month's time. Furthermore, some pirate gangs are deliberately hiding and hiding. This makes the investigation even more difficult. Actually, with the Pegasus pirate gang's reputation, it wasn't difficult to investigate this matter. A month's time was enough for Chubby to find a suspect. Otherwise, he wouldn't know that Knight Serenity was the one who robbed the Voyager and killed him. The reason why he was able to find so many excuses was mainly because of Qin Chuan. Qin Chuan's request for Chubby was very simple. He wanted Duoluan to see hope, but he couldn't immediately give Duoluan the results he wanted. Simply put, he wanted to keep Duoluan in suspense and delay as much time as possible. Although Duoluan held a high position as the young lord of the Yin clan, he didn't know much about space pirates. Therefore, when he heard Chubby's explanation that didn't seem to have any problems, he thought for a moment and believed it. After all, the universe was vast and boundless. Finding over 100 pirate gangs in a month's time and eliminating them one by one was indeed a difficult task. I don't have any more time. Duoluan's expression was a little ugly as he said in a deep voice, I can only give you 2 more months at most. Chubby looked at Duoluan with a subtle gaze and said, Young lord, if I may be so bold as to ask, what exactly are you looking for? If you can give me a specific target, it might be easier to find it. Hearing Qiu Bai's words, Duoluan looked deeply at Qiu Bai and said, I'm looking for a coffin. Qin Chuan and Knight Serenity heard Duoluan's answer. Although their expressions didn't change, their hearts tightened. Duoluan was indeed looking for a coffin. To be precise, he was looking for Qin Chuan, who was lying in the coffin. A coffin? Qiu Bai was surprised and asked, Is it the corpse of one of the Yin clan's seniors? Of course not. Duoluan coldly snorted. He's just a piece of trash. After saying this, Duoluan frowned and said to Cupid, You don't need to ask too much. Just follow my instructions and find them. Yes, I understand. Chubby didn't dare to ask any more and said respectfully, I will definitely give you a satisfactory answer within 2 months. After leaving the garden and returning to the banquet hall, Qin Chuan and Knight Serenity started a private conversation. From Duoluan's attitude, it seems like the Yin clan doesn't have any good intentions towards me. Qin Chuan's expression was grave. But what I'm curious about is how the enmity between me and the Yin clan came about. Qin Chuan couldn't understand. Back then, he was far away in Tron Nebula, far away from the celestial cluster. He had never come into contact with anyone from the Yin clan. Even if he did, it was when he was unconscious. Since that was the case, why would Duoluan hate him so much? Knight Serenity pondered for a moment before speaking to Qin Chuan. There's one thing you might not know. The people in charge of transporting you back then weren't from the Yin clan, but a mercenary group. They were very weak and unremarkable. Qin Chuan frowned when he heard Knight Serenity's words. What are you trying to say? I suspect that this matter is only related to Dweluan and has nothing to do with the Yin clan. Yu said to Qin Chuan, perhaps Dweluan secretly hired a mercenary group to secretly transport you to the 49th district. If it wasn't for the fact that my subordinates hadn't looted for too long and weren't willing to let go of any passing spaceships, you might not have fallen into my hands back then. Qin Chuan was slightly taken aback when he heard this. He was puzzled as he asked, so, Dweluan and I don't know each other. Today is the first time we've met. Judging from his tone and expression, he should hate me very much. Since that's the case, why is he looking for me so anxiously? Knight Serenity couldn't answer Qin Chuan's question because she didn't know what Dweluan wanted to do. However, there was one thing she was sure of, and that was that Dweluan didn't have any good intentions towards Qin Chuan. Even if Dweluan had the slightest bit of goodwill towards Qin Chuan, he definitely wouldn't use the word trash to describe Qin Chuan. Just as Qin Chuan and Knight Serenity were pondering this question, the other guests finally arrived. Qin Chuan looked around and asked Chubby, will there be universe overlords coming today? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.